like it feels spectacularly unambitious, I want to say. And I mean, it's like I say this advisedly. I'm not really in the setting out to diss anyone, but if you go to the website, it's essentially they have one model of guitar, and you can choose the colors, and you can choose whether the top is um, flamed or quilted, and you can choose whether the neck is flamed or bird's eye. Sorry, let me just kill the audio on the YouTube stream. Here we go. And so what's but these guitars are £3,500, and so that kind of struck me as sort of relevant to now, because what we've got is I think like when we in terms of like modern guitar manufacturing, I think one of the things that is one of the most determining factors in it is where the guitars are made, because there's this ongoing discussion about should guitars be more expensive just because they're made in the States or in Germany or whatever. We all accept that guitars made in the Far East are going to be more affordable, except guitars made in Japan, obviously, which are these days probably just as expensive as American guitars. Korean guitars are getting up there now. So I think it goes kind of, America, Japan, and then anything European. And then you've got Korean guitars, and then Indonesian guitars, and then maybe Chinese guitars are the cheapest guitars you can get. But so it sort of raised the question, because it's like, even in I watched a lot of video that Rob and Lee Anderton were doing to launch these things. And it seemed to be that there's a bit where Lee Anderton actually says, well, to be honest, this is more Rob's thing than mine. And it seemed a really weird thing to say in the launch, because it's like, why would you start by disowning this thing and saying it's his idea, it's his idea? And it seems to me that Lee's already thinking this isn't going to work, and I don't see it working. I think that the whole point of it clearly was just to have a UK base of actual guitar manufacturing, and I just think it's going to fall on its arse. So I think, in a way, that the future of the guitar industry probably is, to my thinking, tied into where guitars are made. I'm not sure if it's even sustainable anymore to start a new company, like down the road from here, and make guitars and sell them at a profit and everything like that. As a company, as a business, as an ongoing thing. I don't think there is the market there. I don't think loads of people are lining up to pay $3,500 for a Chapman guitar that is, arguably a lot, a higher spec, nominally in terms of the wood selections and whatnot than the Chapman guitars you get from Indonesia. But other than that, I can't see it working. And I think that tends to be my feeling, and it's sort of reflective of the music industry as a whole. It kind of feels like the same thing, where all the major bands that touring arenas and all that kind of stuff are the bands that were doing it 25 years ago. And I kind of feel like any guitar brand launching now is going to have a real uphill struggle to kind of establish itself, especially if it's trying to do something like that. And because newer companies are, the future of guitar manufacturing, or is it going to be a case where it's like in 30 years, 50 years, or whatever, it's still the same big 5 or 6 brands that are making all the guitars? I don't know. So that was my starting point. It's just because that piece of news sort of happened today, and it didn't give me a good feeling. It didn't leave me feeling optimistic about where this whole thing's going. So I don't know what you guys think.
I actually watched that video earlier. One thing I thought was, like, for $3,500, there are loads of companies you could get to just build whatever guitar you want.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I sent a list of those companies to my friend. I was like, there's ESP Custom Shop, Japson Custom Shop, obviously Fender Custom Shop. You can get a Gibson Custom Shop guitar for starting at that kind of money. There's Patrick Eggle in the UK. There's a couple of UK brands and so on. So
Carillion is one in the UK.
Yep, absolutely.
Crimson guitars.
Yeah. Feline.
It just feels
the
like
Feline guy was making Black Machine guitars for a while, wasn't he, as well? So it's like, it's not like it's only like Gibson and Fender type guitars. It's like these modern super strats. It's like the Ibanez ones. They are essentially like that kind of the Wilkinson style trem. It's humbucker double single coil. You get those fancy woods. It's kind of like the
AZs,
AZs. Yeah, AZs, exactly. Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah. Charvels. Competes with Charvel a bit as well.
Yeah, they're going up against massive competition. It seems to me they're not really offering anything within the guitar. That their selling point is that it's made in the UK and that you can kind of pick like 2 or 3 things, but you can't even like say they don't give you just an open field of humbuckers to choose from or whatever, or pickups to choose from. They're saying you have to have these Chapman pickups, which are their own pickups and they've designed them and everything, and presumably they're good. But that doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to want those. It's like you go into that, maybe someone wants some other pickup in there, and you can't. That's not one of the things you can choose. So it's like
I
don't
think
know.
they've went back to using Seymour Duncans in the production ones. That they stopped using the Chapman pickups they were using a few years ago,
Yeah.
which is interesting. But it doesn't tell you what the pickups are in those guitars either, does it? In that video, it doesn't
Oh,
tell you
it
what any
does.
of the specs are.
It's Carnex or something like that.
So
Hang on, let me just find the website.
I only watched the
Yeah,
video with Lee and Rob, so I didn't actually see. They didn't say what the spec was.
here we go. Workshop series. So I'm just going to the page. Um, Here we go. Blah blah blah. So UK residents 3,499. Non-UK 3 grand, including delivery, not including local taxes. So the specs are, so all the bodies are gonna be satin nitro African mahogany. All the necks are going to be maple. So the fretboards are all maple as well. You can't choose to have something else. It's like all maple neck, maple fretboard. This kind of it looks like roasted maple or something like, yeah, roasted bird's eye or flame maple, satin nitro. They're all 22 frets. It looks like they're all hum sing sing. They all have the same inlays. You can choose the radius between 14 and 12 inches. It's all 25 and a half, and the pickups are custom made Chapman Carnyx, Carnyx, balanced vintage hot output, which okay is gonna be, they're gonna be good, but again, it's like that's not necessarily what everyone's gonna want.
At that price, you should be able to pick exactly what you want.
100%.
That's
Well,
crazy.
to be fair, if I get this right, so basically they're going to be made in the UK, but
Yeah.
When you buy it, there's only a selection of parts that you can then plonk together and get sent, and some of those parts are not even selectable. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that how...
the-
Okay,
yeah,
so
essentially.
so essentially that smells to me like they're not made in the UK. That's probably assembled in the UK.
I think you're probably right. I think probably they're farming the bodies and necks in from abroad because
And
it
to be
seems
fair-
like the necks are all going to be the same thing, just either flame maple or bird's eye maple. So the necks are probably coming from somewhere else.
Yeah. So let me
And then the
do
bodies are.
let me volley the shit in the fan, but I've got a suspicion that's it's a bullshit then, and it's quite a Rob thing to do.
Yeah, that's kind of what he got caught out with last time. Last time they were called the British Standard Series, wasn't it?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
Yes,
so that's what
yeah.
it was. Yeah. So I mean, I don't want to be, I don't want to be shitting all over him, but it just doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like a custom shop thing. It doesn't seem like, come to us, tell us what you want, and we'll make it.
No.
That's what a custom shop should be, to my mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably why it's called the Workshop Series.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's technically not saying custom shop. So if you start like pointing that out, they go, well, it's not actually a custom shop. Although he did say in that video a custom shop.
The language is interesting because here it says the new workshop series is a substantial step in our new exciting direction, which implies that this is just the first kind of step in their plan. Maybe eventually they're hoping to get to a point where they can make stuff to order and it actually make money. But I don't see, this is just a bunch of super strats in different colors, and these colors are just they're not like, they're nothing to write home about. It's like there's an amber burst here, there's a kind of a denim thing, there's a couple of fades. I mean, they're nice, but it's just like, again, I 3.5 grand. It's huge. It's a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't look worth that.
Gary, is that you
Yeah.
in the chat? Always forget what your YouTube username is. Anyway, okay, so basically, the first part of this conversation was about innovation, which really isn't innovation.
Yes.
No, definitely not.
Okay. Anyway, so I actually I Thanks for joining us, Gary. So I honestly had to actually Google like innovations because my mind was blank. So I made like a, one of those word cloud things. But I'm gonna let you start, Max.
Okay. Well, all right. So, I mean, the timeline is well known, so I'm not going to dwell on it. But I guess it's like, you've got all your sort of, we're talking very late 40s and then the 50s onwards. So the electric guitar, I would say, in terms of like it being a popular industry, really is from sort of 51, 52 onwards. And it was really, before then, there were like hollows and semi-hollows, mainly hollows with pickups on them, which are different, to my mind, to like the electric guitar type thing.
Yeah.
So really, I think it's like, I think the law at least is, and there are details that people argue over, but I think it's like basically Les Paul kind of cobbled together the first sort of solid body electric guitar, and then Fender came along and bolted a couple of bits of wood together and put pickups on, and that was their sort of attempt to kind of make a mass producible electric guitar. So I guess in terms of innovations, that's where we're starting, isn't it? And then in the 50s you had, so it went from like a single coil type thing. So Fender had their sort of single coils that we know as the Strat and Telecaster pickups. Gibson had more of a kind of a P90 thing. I mean, it really started with the Charlie Christian pickup, which was in the sort of the mid 40s, I think. And then it went to a straight P90. So the Les Paul, you can look at sort of the Les Pauls in the 50s to see the evolution. I think it was in 57 really that they introduced what we know as the PAF humbucker, which is pretty much the template for really still all humbuckers apart from actives and the things people are doing now. So those are the core, I guess, the first sort of the first steps towards actually making the thing that we think of as being the electric guitar. At the one end of the spectrum, you've got all the things that led to the Telecaster and the Strat, and on the other end of the spectrum, you've got kind of the double humbucker solid body guitar, sort of the Les Paul type or whatever. And then everything else is sort of in between there. On the amplifier side, I guess it follows a similar kind of thing. I think most sort of the modern thing that we think of as the amplifier was kind of developed in tandem. There were amplifiers around to kind of amplify the pickups they were putting on jazz guitars before then, but again, they're not really sort of dedicated guitar amplifiers as we think about them. They're more sort of glorified like PA systems, that kind of thing. I guess, I think then when we get sort of for our purposes, I think there's that whole argument about like who invented distortion, that whole legend about it being like a torn speaker. The first fuzz sounds, I think probably the treble booster, the Dallas Arbiter treble booster. You probably know more about that than I do, Helmut. And then I think, going forward from there, I think the funny thing is, as you go through the decades, it starts to emerge, like as much as guitar players are tinkerers, we like to kind of personalize things. At the same time, I think it does emerge just quite how sort of conservative we are as a bunch. Because if you think about it, like 70 years later, we're still kind of thinking of the things that were done 70 years ago are still kind of perfectly good. Yeah. And the points of innovation that we could come across since then. So there's like the Floyd Rose in sort of the late 70s, early 80s. That was developed by Floyd Rose and Van Halen, sort of out of other vibrato systems that had existed since the Bigsby. That was interesting, not because it allowed you to have vibrato, or that's interesting in its own right. It was sort of the advent of the double locking tremolo, which is the idea that you could immobilize strings and make sure they didn't drop out of tune. I think that was a fairly major innovation in terms of what it allowed guitar players to do. Beyond that, I think the introduction of solid state amplification, maybe. I don't know exactly when that was, but I think the sort of the ability to kind of have amplification that didn't have valves in it. That's a big deal. I'm deliberately not going down the pedal side of things because, again, Helmut, I think you probably know a lot more about that than I do. And I would say I think I'm gonna skip ahead to, I think I'm going to bring up the robot tuner.
Oh God.
Which I think is well, I think it's interesting because it is a really important innovation, right? But I think what's interesting about it is Okay, it was a technology. It wasn't perfect,
That was the
but
one
it actually worked.
that Gibson brought out that was under the headstock.
Yes, absolutely. It was interesting that it actually worked surprisingly well. And when I tried to, when it first came out, I had some friends who ran a guitar store locally, and they had like Gibson days because they were a Gibson dealer, and they brought in these guitars. And I think famously they had that guitar called the Dusk Tiger, which was they'd made in very very limited numbers, and that was a special guitar for loads of other reasons. But it had one of those robot tuner systems on it, and I remember trying it and being surprised at actually how well it did work. So it could potentially have been, a sort of a really interesting development, but it just seemed to be that it was just rejected on principle rather than because it was not a functional concept. Do you know what I mean? Like so many people just kind of went, no, I don't want that. And it
Well,
just seems strange because. Sorry, go on.
So my experience during that time when it came out, every video that I remember seeing about it was that it's like one of those things that work really well. Well, they work 99% really well, but that 1% is the deal breaker. That's what I remember. So it kind of worked, but it wasn't precise enough, or there was something like that that was always came out again. That there was.
I think you're right. I guess the point I'm making is that it was nascent technology. So if they had stuck with it, maybe in like 5 or 6 years of having guitars commonly made and bought and used with robot tuning on them, it might have led to a point where, it's like when amp modeling first happened in like the 90s, and everyone went, well, it's a great idea, but it's kind of shit, but we'll stick with it. And now we're at a place where in a blind test you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between like a Kemper and an actual amp.
Yeah.
Because people stuck with it, and it's developed and developed and developed to the point now where it's like no one knows. If you're not actually in the room, you have no idea what actually made the sound. And I think
maybe if they stuck with it, they could have developed it enough to keep the guitar in tune when the headstock broke off.
Yeah. Now that would have been a hell of a thing. But that goes back to double locking tuners, isn't there? Because there's that famous clip of Dimebag having snapped the headstock off his guitar, but it's still in tune and he can still play it because it's got the locking thing at the nut.
Yeah.
Peter, I wish I said that. I feel so shit now because I wish I made that comment. but what I was thinking about is like if they put it on an SG, which already suffers heavily from neck dive, imagine how much worse they would have made the neck dive on an SG.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Well, my thought is like on that thing. It's like one of those things that it's nice to have and it's cool and all, but actually it's not necessary enough to really make your day that much easier and better. I think that's why some things don't carry on and work out, because they're cool and all, but they're just not they don't make that too much of a difference, I suppose. I mean,
it's not like
it is interesting that Gibson came out with it. I mean, all they had to do was put the little robot tuner, but only have it for the G string, and everybody would have been happy.
Well, I said to a friend the other day, like, it would be if Ibanez had put it on their guitars, I reckon we'd still have it, because Ibanez players are way more like early adopters than like Gibson players who are just like, no, I just want this 50s Les Paul, thank you.
It also seems like something Ibanez would do, which it didn't look like something Gibson did. Absolutely, I think you're right. Sorry, Peter, I interrupted you there.
I was saying it kind of almost, the Evertune kind of got that right, didn't it? They were trying to go down that path, but that was apparently a bit of a slow burner as well, the Evertune bridge.
Yeah. The good thing about the Evertune is that it's mechanical.
Yeah.
So there's no microchips there. It's just working on a mechanical principle. So I think people are probably warm to it a little bit more. I think people don't like the ideas of some types of guitar players don't like the idea of like batteries and microchips and whatnot. Because at the same time, people really hated those in the Les Paul, they for a time they had those little the PCB inside the control cavity with all those dip switches. And everyone was like, no, I don't want that.
Yeah.
And the modern version, wasn't it? The Les Paul
That's
modern.
it. Yeah.
Gibson probably while I'm not a Gibson fan, probably can't really win like that because their customers want it to stay the way it was.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
anytime they try something, they seem to get jumped on. Don't help themselves, but yeah, they do seem to get jumped on when they try anything new.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, the Evertune is like a good example where the difference that makes is that it absolutely stops your guitar from going out of tune, and not in the same way that a double locking trem does, but in because even a double locking trem, your strings can lose some tightness
Yeah,
and over time slowly dip out of tune. Whereas with the Evertune, you set it to something and that's it. You're done.
yeah.
You
I've
Yeah,
know,
got some.
it
I've got
looks
some.
for the balance. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got some friends that have them, and they're actually pretty amazing what they do. See, there's when you do bends, you can feel like it's a little bit not quite like a little slight little lag, but you get used to it after a while, and then you don't even notice.
What's interesting is when you go on the Evertune website, you look at the range of guitars they sell that they've themselves fitted with
Yeah,
Evertunes, and they're all like the sort of the Schecters and the LTDs and all that kind of stuff. And that fits, doesn't it? But it's like I saw a rig rundown, and it was that producer guy who used to work at Sound City, and he's got a like a fit. No, it's I think it's probably like a modern, but it's like a Les Paul Junior. One of the things that just had like a stop bar tailpiece,
yeah.
and he's actually taken that out, plugged the things, and had someone put like an Evertune in there, and it just looks like the weirdest thing ever. It just doesn't look right at all. It's strange.
It's about it takes a lot of wood as well. I've heard people have them retrofitted, and they say it ruined the sound of the guitar. So that if you're going to get them retrofitted, if you have a particular guitar you love the sound of, then definitely don't do it to that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's going to
You're,
change
take,
the sound anyway, isn't it?
you're taking an awful lot of wood out of the back for it. It makes it really heavy as well. There's a lot of springs in it. Like it adds a lot of weight to the guitar.
Yeah. I still need to try one. I have a friend of mine who's got like an LTD Eclipse with one in, and he's raving about it. And he's like, "You've got to make a video about this one." I need to go and pick it up. But I will try one out in the coming weeks, and hopefully we'll have a verdict on how good it actually is. But there are some serious people who are saying they are as good as they reckon they are. So,
I've got a couple of mates that have them and swear by them
yeah.
now. Wouldn't do that, and like practically just check their tuning very occasionally, and they might have to ever so slightly fine tune, but very little.
I kind of feel like ideologically though, there's a very long time ago I was reading, maybe even watching this interview, and it was Neil Young, and they were talking about Old Black, his Les Paul that's got a Bigsby on it and everything like that, and they were talking about the points in the set where he's just like hammering on this thing, and by the end of it he's nothing like in tune anymore. And I think the interviewer was probably being like a little bit facetious, but he said, do you not fancy like a guitar with like a Floyd Rose on it, where you could do all that kind of crazy stuff, and at the end of it, you'd still be perfectly in tune. And I think to which Neil Young's response was, "Well, the thing about that is that those guys, it's like they have those guitars and they play these big solos and like they wang away on their whammy bars, and at the end of it, they're like perfectly in tune." And I think, so what? You know, and in a way, it's kind of a good point because it's like it's still because it's all art, it still is like optional, isn't it? It's like if what if part of your aesthetic is actually being out of tune because you've smashed the shit out of your whammy bar? It's like that kind of or whatever. It's like there is part of that process. And I think of it like there's part of it that's like when you're singing, for instance, and say you sing like a really demanding song, and at the start of the song your vocals are really even and sweet and your voice is clear and everything, and then by the end of it your voice is a bit raspier and you may be a little bit pitchy and you sound more ragged and all that kind of stuff, and it's part of the progression of having performed that. And I kind of think to an extent that whole thing about like obsessively keeping the guitar perfectly in pitch on every level, like those true temperament frets and all that kind of stuff, I do kind of feel like in a way that sort of it is you could argue that it's another step towards the sort of the Pro Toolsization of music, where everything is kind of being dragged towards the grid and sort of and away from feeling and emotion and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's just that's obviously there's no right or wrong there. That's just an opinion, but it's I guess it's an interesting thing to me.
It also helps if your band is big enough and you've got loads of text that can hand you another guitar at the end of the song.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
That helps as well.
Well, I mean, for sure, but I think this is going to come up in pretty much every discussion about nearly everything, is that you have this distance between Yoko Ono and Periphery.
Yes.
Okay, you've got
I know exactly what you mean.
and
Yeah,
everything in between. You know, you've got the person who wants to produce his record, and everything has to be perfect. And there's validity in that. And then there's the person who, it's all about free flowing art and stuff like that. I mean, a good example is we were talking about the Evertune, and Gary said Devin Townsend swears by the Evertune system. Now that's obvious. I mean that's quite telling. He's the kind of guy who would absolutely kind of go for this sort of thing, like an Evertune of type.
I think the prog metal guys are definitely the sort of the core buying audience for this kind of thing, aren't they? That kind of yeah.
It brings a level of precision to music that needs it.
See your mic, Max, your camera goes out of focus because it focuses on the mic. I don't know if you should maybe see if you can. You've got the ZV-10. See if you can put the face recognition.
Yeah, it's back on it. The tracking's a little bit weird with it.
Is it on product?
It's fine. It's but yeah, it's so I can hold things up to the camera like that.
There
and you can see exactly where There you go. That's it. Back in focus. There we are.
All right, so
it's the new G7th capo. You need to buy it now. Check the affiliate link in the description.
There was this joke about people that use capos. I can't remember what it was. I wish I could remember. Anyway, so before I wade in, Peter, what are you gonna add to this? Because I feel like Max has kind of mentioned mainly kind of guitar itself things. Whereas I feel like from having done the search and plonked down a bit of a word cloud, I think there are all these additional kind of things that happened around the recording, musical instruments, internet technologies, all these kind of things that also had a massive influence on some of the things we do. Lee Fury says Yoko and Periphery, that's a collaboration I'd love to hear. I don't. I really don't.
Lee's my guitar player in my band. Hi,
right.
Lee.
Hi, Lee. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, I really shouldn't have used those two extremes.
No, they're great. That's perfect.
Peter.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny when you were talking about pickups. Fishman is the one I use. I use Fishman pickups in all my guitars now, and that is the first new technology in pickups since something like the 1930s. That isn't magnets and copper windings. It's incredible to think we've been doing that the same way for that long, before someone actually done something different.
Are EMGs still sort of similar to?
EMGs are actors, but they're still the copper winding with the basically with like a preamp built in. But Fishman's hasn't got magnets and there's no copper windings on it at all. It's printed coils. And then you have multiple voicings, so you can have a passive and active voicing, and some has up to 3 voicings. I've got a couple of different sets, and one has 3 voicings. One based on the PAF, a higher output, and a single coil, the Keith Merrow set. The Moderns is a bit more like your really high output, like an active EMG, but it has a passive voice as well.
Yeah.
And the clarity's crazy and the consistency of them as well. Like really heavy distortion. If you can play across all 6 strings, you hear every single note. The isolation is amazing on them. Great for recording as well. A lot of people say when you're recording, they don't need as much EQing. Almost like they're a bit more mix friendly for mixing.
Yeah.
What are those ones
Well-
called? They're not Fishmans. They're passive, if I'm not mistaken. But they also don't work with a coil. They work on the same principle of an induction motor, but it's just like 2 layers.
It's
or
the
something.
lace.
That's the one.
The lace.
It's
Yeah.
sensor, yeah.
Lace sensor. That's right. I always forget the name.
Yeah.
Has anybody tried
One of
them?
them. No,
So-
one of the Mastodon guys used to use them for years. You could
Lee
get them in-
Fury has that guitar. Yeah, it's really great.
Yeah.
Now since he's with us, hey Lee, we're talking about your Flying V. Yeah, he has the Brent Hines V, the Epiphone one, and it has those lace sensors in it, and they are really good, really good.
They're lower output though, aren't they?
Yeah, they're like a low wound path. They sound really articulate. They have that kind of chewy mid range, you know, that you associate with like those kind of 50s profile pickups, but they still deal with, you know, distortion really well. They're very good pickups.
I've never tried them. I know the other Kelleher, he had them in his LTDs as well, but he switched to Seymour Duncan's.
Yes.
Well,
But a lot of that might just be, you know, sponsorships and stuff like that. I don't know. You know, if
could well
somebody-
be, yeah.
If somebody like that changes pickups, is it maybe because, I don't know, he's gonna get a big pile of cash for it or something? I don't know.
Yeah. I'd imagine Seymour Duncan would be paying a bigger company like.
But I must say the
Yeah,
lace...
I think.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was gonna say. I mean, I've been around the houses with pickups, mainly passives, and I would say that at one point I spent quite a lot of money on a set of Pearly Gates that I put in a Les Paul, and it was okay. But just lately I had that White Jackson that had a JB and a 59 in it, and they were okay. But I mean, they're only ever just okay, and I think it's like. They're a bit like DiMarzio's, and I've had a run of DiMarzio's, and then I've had 2 sets of bare knuckles. I had Juggernauts in an Ibanez, and I had War Pigs in another, and I did like them, but I would say for what they cost, because it's like you're running like £400 a set now for a pair of like bare knuckles, not the brute force ones, but the proper ones, I guess, the hand wide and the UK ones or whatever. It's like it's expensive stuff, and it's like I don't ever feel like they're that much better than what comes in what comes stock. I felt like with the lace sensors that we were talking about, I felt like I could really tell the difference, but like generally with Seymour's, I've always found them a little bit underwhelming.
Yeah, same. I had a JB and a 59 in the Schecter, and I wasn't that blown away by it. And I had, what the other ones were, and another one. Not a massive fan. See, some people say like the Fishmans I have are about 125 quid per pickup, so they're roughly about the same price or a tiny bit more, but you're effectively getting like 2 pickups in the one. So the passive and the active voice, which is good for double tracking the different voices as well. You get the clarity. But what pickups are you using now?
Well, so I chop and change. So at the moment, I'm making a Les Paul at the moment, which I showed you, Helmet, in the last video, and I have a set of Creamery 59 PF style pickups in there that I haven't heard yet because I haven't got the wiring loom. That's coming from Monty's. And then the other guitar that I got just 2 days ago that I'm using now is a Hagstrom Super Viking, and that has like the Hagstrom Custom 58, and it has a P90 in the neck, and it has a really interesting feature where if you roll off the tone pot, it doesn't filter the treble, it filters the bass, and what that does is it turns the P90 into like a Strat neck pickup. So they're actually really good, and this is like. I mean, it's not an affordable guitar. It's still like, I don't know, £900 or whatever. But they're not like, I don't think you can buy them aftermarket. I think they're just the ones that come in the guitar, but they're actually I really like them. I think they're really nice.
Okay. Right. Are we? Do you guys mind if I go through a bit of this word cloudy shit here with what I think is kind of mentionable in the defining moments?
Yeah.
You mentioned quite a few that kind of relate directly to the guitar, I think. But reading some of the stuff that just got thrown on the screen when you do like a basic search, a lot of things actually come to mind. It's like multi-track recording. Sorry, do you see I had to move my camera so you can see my sweetheart, my dog. she, she usually has her butt. She like looks out the window, then her butt's right in view, but she went to let it. Anyway, so multi-track recording, auto-tune, digital recording software, DAWs, transistors and valves, streaming. I think streaming is a big deal. Looping pedals, MIDI for not just for kind of music, but also controlling things. Smartphones. Here's one: AI mastering. Okay, it's a technology, so I'm gonna mention it. Pocket synths, guitar construction methods, but I also thought guitar construction materials. If you look now, all the stuff that's coming out, some of the necks made purely of aluminium, carbon fiber reinforcing the necks so they don't move so much in different temperatures and stuff like that. But here's one I thought is actually probably the most interesting one. It wasn't in the list, but it came to my head, like the affordability of good instruments.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more choice now than there was when I started playing.
Yeah, so
100%.
So if you
all price points,
if you stop thinking about just the like innovations, which like different new pickups or emulation and impulse response stuff, but if you just think of the basic thing of, if I now want to buy my boy a guitar, and I want it to be decent and playable, I don't have to spend $1,000 anymore. I can spend £200.
I had so a friend of mine who lives just across the street. Actually, he lent me 2 guitars. One of them was a very, very high end Loden acoustic, which was absolutely beautiful, and the other one was Squire Affinity Stratocaster. And I'm no friend of the Stratocaster, but I have some experience of, like, some months ago, well, actually a couple of years ago now, I bought like one of the sort of the higher end American ones, and I chose between that, and I was playing some custom shop ones at the time. And what I would say is that the sort of it was the Squire Affinity, which is probably about 150 quid now. It was very, very good. It was really good,
I have a friend of mine actually from work that started playing about a year and a half ago, and didn't know what he was looking for, so he asked me to recommend him stuff. And it was a Squire Affinity Strat we got, but it had the humbucker and the bridge.
Yeah.
And it was actually really nice. I think it was about 180 quid.
Yeah.
And the Boss Katana mini amp,
Yes.
which are really good. I've actually got one of them in the house. I got one for my fiance for Christmas as well. It is really good.
I've got a Roland Cube in my living room. I play like everything. I play that more than any other amp that I've had, because it's in my living room and it's just little and you can play it quietly, but it sounds. I mean, it doesn't. I wouldn't record with it, but it sounds like really good.
Yeah, your guitar sounds like your guitar rather than something like the old like my first practice amp was what the hell was it? It was a Prime or something, and it didn't have a distortion. You just turned the gain up till it started to break up, and it sounded awful.
Yeah.
Like now you can get the mini Katana is metaplastic, really, really light. And you have clean crunch and brown, and it even has a reverb delay on it. And you can it's so easy to dial in quick, and it actually sounds pretty good for what it is.
Or you can get from IK Multimedia, you can get a dongle that lets you plug a guitar into your smartphone, and you can download like a cut down version of Guitar Rig, and then you Bluetooth it to headphones, and for like
Yeah.
40 quid or something like that, you've got all the guitar amps that you want, and you could just listen to it through your headphones. And it's like, if I had had that, it would have blown my tiny mind if I'd had that when I was
It's
first
crazy,
starting.
Yeah,
crazy, isn't it?
but
Yeah.
what I find interesting about these last few things that we mentioned is like these innovations didn't they aren't innovations around the guitar. They are, in my opinion, innovations towards the usability and the flexibility and the availability of guitar, and making it more accessible, making it easier. I mean, like just being able to practice in your house without annoying every single person that lives with you
Yeah,
is a big deal,
Yeah.
actually, if you think about it.
definitely. Yeah, my first amp was like a 10-watt solid state Vantage, and it did actually have a distortion channel, which was probably no better than the absence of distortion channel. It sounded like a bee in a jar. But yeah, even at 10-watt solid state, it was still too loud, really, to be able to practice on without annoying my family.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely true. If I'd had something I could plug headphones into, just a headphone jack on that amplifier would have made my life so much easier. But I think, Helmut, what you're talking about really is sort of this kind of idea of democratization. Like, people should be able to, in any circumstance, they should be able to play their guitar. And I think it's a surprisingly recent development, isn't it? Where you could
Yeah.
you could play it on a train if you wanted to, and there's no way you could have done
Yeah.
that 25 years ago.
Yeah, but it doesn't just relate to guitar. It also relates to drums. It relates to violins. It relates to all sorts of musical instruments nowadays. You know, price and technology, which has made it so that you can play it. Like my daughter wanted to. She was umming and ahhing between. Um, Fine, she's got a piano now, and she's carrying on with that like an absolute star. But she was possibly thinking of getting a violin, and I was like,
Yeah.
there's nothing worse than listening to somebody practicing a violin when they can't play it. So I was looking into the electric ones, that you just put earphones in, and what are they? 120, 130 pounds?
You've done it now.
Oh man.
No, I won't do it.
But and then you get like some of these flutes and stuff, which are also now kind of digital, and you're like, fine, they're not gonna sound great, but it means that somebody can actually practice the stuff,
Yeah.
And nobody's gonna complain.
It's never been a better time to learn as well, because the amount of resources available.
Well,
Like,
that's
like with YouTube and stuff. Like, I can remember when I first started playing guitar, and I can remember buying guitar magazines, but you have to try and make sense of what was actually been explained to you. And I remember one I always go back to is pinch harmonics. I could never figure out how to do a pinch harmonic, and I remember reading this lesson by Zach Wilde and telling you how to do it, and I could never get it. And the first time I ever got a pinch harmonic, and to this day is probably still the best pinch harmonic I've ever done in my life, was an accident when I was in a recording studio doing a solo. I was doing it in two sections because the second half had wah on it. So I'm sitting there waiting for the part to come in, foot on the wah, ready to go, and I dug into the note way too hard and got the best pinch harmonic I've ever heard in my life. Whereas nowadays you would just go on YouTube and you'd see loads of people showing you how to actually do it.
Well, hasn't Zach Wilde actually just started giving guitar lessons as well on the internet? That's his new thing, isn't it?
He's doing riff hard stuff, isn't he?
That's it. Yeah. But I mean, you wouldn't want Zach Wilde to teach you. First, you got to drink a beer, and then you got to drink another beer, and then you got to play
No.
heavy metal.
Honestly, I think
drink
that's
anymore.
exactly what we need. We talked about this last time. Here's your guitar. Here's your bottle of whiskey. Get on with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know you're just 10. What do you want?
In Ireland, that's the normal age you start at.
Exactly.
Oh man, I grew up in France. They give you wine with breakfast.
But the internet and knowledge was one that I added because of exactly what Peter said, is this accessibility to knowledge, but more importantly, accessibility to different versions of the same knowledge. So, for example, if you wanted to play Pantera, you went to the shop and you bought the Pantera tab book, right?
Yeah.
And nowadays you know there's a few YouTubers who've covered it, like how many mistakes were in those books. There were actually a shitload of mistakes in it. But nowadays you know you can go and you can view videos from like 5 different people trying to teach you, let's say, you know, walk or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming that you know less they might also be making mistakes, but at least you have like a cumulative kind of like, okay, which one sounded the best. Also, which person is showing me the stuff in the way that resonates with me.
Just to play devil's advocate, though, for a minute, because I will say that, you know, it sounds like we've had very similar experiences where it's like, if I could afford a guitar magazine and it'd be one guitar magazine a month, and I was, you know, whatever was in that guitar magazine, if I was lucky, it'd be something I want to play, and then it was wrong. But at the same time, what it did force me to do is just take the record and learn it by ear. And it might have been wrong, but at least I was developing my ear training. And I kind of think like that might have been a good thing, as opposed to people who uh their first reaction is to go to the internet and go, okay, well, I want to learn how to play this. Where's the tab? Where's the lesson with the guy showing me how to do it? Rather than taking the record and sitting down with the guitar and listening to the record and trying to figure it out by ear. Because I think like an important aspect of my approach to playing and writing and listening and learning and that kind of stuff, it made me a very quick study. And I feel like, you know, that's not something that I think maybe it might, you know, I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying that if people have access to all that information without having to try and figure it out for themselves just by using their ears and, you know, trial and error on the guitar, I think maybe that's something that they're missing out on.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. When I first started playing, I used to get a friend of mine to download tabs for me. This is on sites like MX tabs and things like that. Really
Yeah.
early days. And I taught myself how to play for the most part. And one of the albums I learned the most of was the first Deftones album, Adrenaline.
Yes.
And a lot of that was from getting tabs that were actually completely wrong. And as soon as I'd start playing, I go, that's not even close to right. And then,
Yeah.
but it gave you a kind of a jumping off point, if you know what I mean. And
Yeah, for me it was the first Rage Against the Machine record. And it's actually a comparatively easy album to learn because it's all in drop D and all the progressions are sort of the same, just different combinations of the same notes, really. But when you did come across those tabs, you did actually end up realizing actually it taught me to not trust tab that was in magazines because it was like, well, this is just flat wrong. So yeah.
must have been fun trying to figure out some of the sounds he was doing too. Is this a guitar
Oh,
at
well,
all?
I mean, I didn't even know what a whammy pedal was. I was like, how is he doing that? What is that even a guitar? It actually said in the liner notes. It said in the liner notes of that record, it said all of the sounds on this album are made with a guitar. Just to sort of just to make sure that no one thought he was doing it with a synth or something.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you guys are not the first to say that. I think there has been some previous YouTubers saying the same thing, that having to learn the old style with a tape or a record and your ear and maybe some notes and a book trained your ear a lot better than, you know, copying straight from a YouTube
I
tab.
think so, because I mean, certainly from my experiences, like now, if I hear a piece of music, a lot of the time, I know how to play it without even having a guitar. Do you know what I'm saying? You hear the piece of music and you go, okay, well, I can hear it's in these chords. I see what he's done there, so it's like I'd be able to pick up a guitar and play it without even just by having heard it, because I'm so used to figuring out stuff by ear from records. You start to get the knack for it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, maybe the YouTube thing has pushed technique more so than the musicality. You can, you know, like if you're trying to learn a technique, like different scales or sweeping and that type of stuff.
That's
It's
definitely true. Yeah.
pushing that because like now someone comes out has a new spin on a technique within a couple of weeks, it's all over YouTube. Someone's figured out how he's doing it, and then they take from that, and everyone learns from each other much quicker.
Oh, it's like the amount of lessons there are then of just videos analyzing like Tim Henson's technique.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because he's got this unique way of kind of, but he's done videos of his own because he's got a YouTube channel as well. So he's
yeah,
showing you how he puts riffs together and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's very interesting, and
yeah,
I think it's definitely worthwhile. I think it probably it wouldn't hurt people to try and figure out how he does it without having that information, at
yeah,
the same time. But I mean, if it's there, I mean, it's well, the cat's out of the bag now, isn't it? There's not a lot we can do
yeah.
about it.
Sometimes it can be hard to figure out what they're doing by ear if you haven't got the technique they're doing down as well.
Yeah, but I also think I think failure is an important part of learning as well. And I think the idea that you can sit down and actually not figure it out, I think that's something that, you try really hard and then you realize it's too hard for you to figure out. And so you realize you're going to have to get better at it. And
Yeah,
then eventually you might be able to figure it out. I think that's also part of it. I think failure is much less a feature of people's lives now specifically because all that information is kind of available immediately. So they don't have the experience of coming across something that they just can't figure out because they're not there yet.
yeah,
Someone else has done it for them, and here it is, kind of thing. And I think it's like, I'm not one of those people who's like, you need to build character or whatever, but at the same time, I do think like, it's part of the process, and it was part of the process when all that stuff wasn't available. And I think a lot of people kind of did, you know, develop because of it. So I don't know.
yeah. No, I think you're agree with that actually. It's funny you talk about Zach Wilde earlier. I was watching an interview with him on All the English channel, and he's on talking about having to learn all the Pantera stuff, and even he's had to check a few YouTube videos for a few of the licks. Because
Yeah.
obviously it's because he has to cram and learn it quick. But it's quite funny how someone that wouldn't have started out doing that is now doing it as well.
Yeah.
He soon, once he's got it all under his belt, he'll be like, "Oh, by the way, I've got a new course: how to play all the Pantera stuff."
Yeah,
Yeah, he will. He will. I bet. Actually, I'd put money on that. I'd be like, Zach Wilde's approach to playing Dimebag.
Yeah.
I think he'd play walk. He'd play walk with a pinch harmonic every time on that bend.
Yeah.
Don't.
Right. Okay. I think we should try and move on. What other innovations you thought would last but turn out to be fads, and vice versa? I suppose that robot one was already mentioned. I think that was a classic example.
I could see that falling over though, because the minute that was in stores, people were turning their noses up at it. I don't think I ever felt like, and I think it's probably because it appeared first on Gibson's, and I knew enough about Gibson players to know that they wouldn't have it.
Yeah.
Gibson, didn't Gibson not do in one of the years too that you could only buy guitars that year with them on it? You couldn't buy them without it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it might have been like it was 2013 or something like that, where there were certain models that came with them and you couldn't have them without. Yeah.
Yeah, like that didn't do themselves any favors, did it? Like,
No.
Well,
No.
they rarely do themselves any favors.
That's
no.
true.
I actually have a really interesting one. Do any of you remember the Floyd Rose speed loader bridge?
Yes, I do.
And it died in the water very quick. And the only company I can remember ever using them was BC Rich. Quality right there, isn't it?
Yeah, that was the one with the weird headstocks with no tuners on, right?
Yes, yeah, because they had the locking nut was basically had to get special strings, so they had bullet ends on each end of the string.
Pre-stretched strings, yeah.
So once you set it up, if you broke a string, as long as you put exactly the same string gauge on, you could change it in seconds, and you just had a fine tuner. But it had like a lever behind the fine tuner that lifted the saddle up, and that had a bullet end as well. But no one made strings for it. So Slide Rose got some company to make them for a while, but they were so crap they kept breaking, and then they were discontinued. So anyone that bought these guitars can't use them anymore because you can't get strings to them.
It was doomed because it just wasn't modular enough. It's like everything has to be interchangeable with everything else, and it's like if you have to spend a lot of money on a guitar that then only accepts one type of string, and then it's like, it's like these days when you buy a device and you feel like that device has like software that it needs to keep it running, and then I saw actually a post today by a guy who had bought some kind of one of the early Line 6 Variax guitars. and he said it came with like firmware, and then Line 6 stopped supporting the firmware, so they basically bricked the guitar. So he had to take everything out of it and just install passive pickups in it because it just became totally useless. I think that's kind of the same thing. It's like this inbuilt redundancy, isn't it?
Yeah, but yeah. Yeah, you kind of knew something was up to it because the only one that actually used it was BC Rich. Jackson or ESP or any of them didn't use it at all. So you kind of knew why are they not using it, and like maybe BC Rich thought they were going to get ahead of the curve there and get in early, and they just went.
Everyone else
Oh.
is like, no, this is a terrible idea.
Yeah, yeah. I actually knew someone, I knew someone back in Ireland that had one. It was a Warlock, kind
All
of
right, yeah.
Navy Warlock, and yeah, it had the spider style headstock, but no tuners on it. It was weird as hell. Actually, you tuned it kind of like the Evertune with an Allen key on the back
Yes.
on the saddle.
Yeah.
Tuned it there. It's a weird looking thing, but I always think of that as the one as the one that always jumps to mind to me that like was much heralded but never took off, died in the water very, very fast.
Yeah. Crazy idea.
Yeah.
I mean, a good idea, but like, it's like it would have needed to be far wider spread. It would have needed to be like
Yeah.
available on everything, and then people would have warmed to it. But because it was so niche.
Yeah, but hold on,
They would have needed to.
something just popped in my head. Like, if you think about the things that we've mentioned, the robot and this system, and if you think about it, they're not that different and cumbersome and clunky and difficult to deal with as the Floyd Rose. But what was the difference?
True.
The difference was that there was this massive guitar player who used it
Yes.
and melted people's faces with it, and so everybody went, "Oh, hold on." So maybe if the right person went, "Oh, the reason I play this well is because I've got this piece of robot under my headstock."
It's why I was saying to Lee earlier today, it's like, in order for that Chapman workshop thing to work, they're going to have to get someone, like a bunch of big people to play those guitars, because otherwise no one's going to be interested. I think endorsement is always a huge part of making or breaking some kind of new system, and it has to be some big name for people to actually, tag on.
They're gonna have to get someone with credibility other than Rubia.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Because apparently his guitars sell a lot.
Yes, they do. Yeah, but like I said, Lee's actually got one, and it's great. It's really beautiful. It's a nice guitar.
The vocalist in my band has two. He has I don't think it's a Rubia one though, but it's the same telly style one.
Yeah.
Standard series, and then got the end of 7-string, Pro series one. It's actually quite nice. Better than I thought it was going to be.
They're really good guitars, and in a way, that's kind of their problem, because it's like, why would you spend 3.5K on like a slightly better version of a guitar you can pick up for less than $1,000, and that is every bit as good, and might even come stock with some really nice pickups in it. It's like, whatever.
Well,
So-
I would give it half a thumbs up if it was truly a UK made product and it was more customizable, and even then, if it's $3,000 or $4,000, because obviously if you try to run a business, or if you look at from a not off topic, but essentially it is important for people to be able to start a business and have some sort of success with it. Because if they do, they might grow, they might become an employer, they will pay taxes, they might bring in foreign currency, etc. And I feel like if something is really made in your country and you want to support your small businesses and your startups and your homegrown stuff, then this idea of buying local is a good idea, even if it's twice the price that you can buy it off Amazon or something.
Well, I mean, if it was 1,500 quid, I'd be like, what? That's interesting.
No,
but it's like, I don't.
No, what I'm getting at is like, if it's really if there's a whole bunch of people sitting there building guitars and maybe even, some new people learning how to build guitars in the process, and and the stuff is built here. I don't want to say necessarily from scratch, but like at least in the majority, and the stuff is then massively expensive.
So you're saying like if they made a video like video tour of like the workshop. Here's where we're cutting the bodies. Here's our apprentices. Here's how we make them. Here's the whole thing. It's completely UK made. We're proving it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they did that. Then yeah, it would feel a lot more legitimate, definitely.
Because I understand why things cost so much if you do it. If you don't outsource it to a massive like manufacturing plant in Shenzhen, you know what I mean?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And I all day long I would happily promote it, no matter whose business it is, because it's really important that that's the only way we ourselves, the US, many other countries who've relied so much on foreign manufacturing. It's the only way that countries like that can bring hand-built stuff, hand-built businesses and products back into their own country, is by supporting the small ones that are trying to do it again.
Yeah.
So if that was the case, I wouldn't be so. But my suspicions, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but my suspicions is this is all stuff from the kit builds brought in, plonked together, and that's obviously why there's such little customization going on. It's just obvious.
I remember when they announced the last time they tried this, and it was the British Standard series. There was some Luther in England that was building them, because it came a thread on social media about it. Someone put two and two together. I remember the video Chapman made, and you could see stuff in the background. And then I cannot remember the name of the company. Very, very small.
Oh yeah,
And
I remember it. Now I remember this issue.
So they put up a picture on their social media, and someone recognized it from Chapman's and put two and two together who it was. And then there was a bit of like bit of shade been thrown back and forth with him, wasn't there?
I remember that. Yeah.
There were a lot of shade. I mean, there was a whole debacle where he made some frankly embarrassing videos defending it. Yeah, so
I wonder I wonder who is it that's actually making these ones? Like, have they been like effectively ghost built by someone, or are they just been bringing parts in and assembling it?
Well, I mean, there'll have to be some kind of. I mean, it can't be fully just like brought in. There'll have to be some kind of actual work going in the UK for it to be. There'll have to be some established workshop doing it. So it could be the Feline guy, because I don't think the Feline guy's making the black machines anymore. So he might have capacity to do that, but feels like it needs to be a slightly bigger operation than that. I don't know.
I think that was the issue last time, that the crowd that took on hadn't got the capacity to make enough of them.
Yeah.
And that's why the back orders, and then it fell apart.
That's it.
Funny that he's brought the same idea back, though, isn't it? That he seems to persist with it to bring it.
Well, like I say, I mean, that's probably why Lee Anderton was saying, well, this is his idea, not mine. It seems like something that he's just desperate to do for some reason. I just think he likes the idea of having a custom shop or whatever, but I don't know. Yeah. It's his thing, I guess.
Hopefully KDH can look into it first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, any other fads?
Any other fads?
Oh,
I mean,
no.
there's lots and lots of like that. It's funny. There's periodical fads. I think a lot of the fads kind of come out of like. I mean, one thing that obviously sort of there's been lots of false stuff. I mean, when you get into like studio production equipment, there's loads of stuff that 5 years later is worthless junk, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's like, I mean, just lately, you know, there's I don't know. I came into some gear from like a studio liquidation. There's so much of it that's sort of like, I mean, there's their natural obsolescence to technology and whatnot, but it's like, you know, I think probably it's tricky to say, because I think the early modeling stuff, I mean, this is, you know, sort of niche, but I think it's like the emulation as opposed to, I think now pretty much everything's kind of going down the road of profiling, isn't it, rather than emulation. And I think that whole emulation thing has kind of run its course. But I mean, it was a successful fad because it made lots of people loads of money. So I suppose there is that. But yeah, I think I don't know. I mean, I guess well, that then there's the vice versa thing. What are the things that you thought would not be successful that turned out to be massively successful? Because I think that's kind of a rich vein for me. Because I'm terrible at looking at stuff and going, nah, that's never going to succeed, and then it and then it becomes massively popular. Do you know what I mean? I mean, actually, I would say that, you know, the fact that Chapman guitars exists at all, because when they first started doing Chapman guitars like 10 years ago, I thought there's no way they're ever going to make any money on this, and they're still going strong. I mean, the Far Eastern guitars, you know,
Yeah.
the
Oh, if
Tosin
anything,
Abasi ones. There you go. The Tosin Abasi guitars. You know the ones
he's
I
had,
mean.
he's had no end of problems as well, hasn't he?
Has he?
Oh yeah, he had he was originally getting them built by a guy called Frank Falbo, who makes acoustics. It's weird. He's had no end of drama. He had Grover Jackson making them, and he tried to say then the Jackson couldn't paint them, like that wasn't up to their scratch. And there was some drama with Falbo where I can't remember, shifted
Peter,
stock out of a workhouse.
Peter. Sorry, I'm gonna just if my camera goes off, I just have to put a new battery in. So, just in case, just so you know, I just wanted to quickly let you guys know. It looks like
Yeah.
it's not charging, but sorry, carry on.
Yeah, there was some drama with him, and he had to move the stock out of someone's workshop because the workshop was going under or something. There's a lot of weird stuff with his, because he was
Yeah.
pushing them guitars for years, but no one actually had one for about 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, and then it seemed all of a sudden like I think it well it, maybe I'm wrong, but it just feels maybe what he did was he gave a bunch of them to a lot of people on the internet.
Initially,
'Cause it's
yeah,
like
that's what. Yeah,
all of a
initially
sudden
that was the
everyone
case.
had one, and it was like, oh yeah, so I guess they must have gotten for I mean, he just must have given them away.
Yeah, and some of the first ones that started to surface were absolutely horrific. There's, a friend of mine used to have has a podcast called The Guitar Souls, and
Yeah.
they used to cover it quite. They were on quite a lot then around the time of this, and that Frank Falbo guy actually contacted them to give his side of the story that happened.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Um, it was pretty crazy. I don't know. I think you can get them now, but for quite a few years it was a really struggle. But he was having issues. It was people that were building them were constantly changing and changing. I think he was trying to do like full on custom shop thing first,
Right.
and rather than getting them produced and then building up to that. And I think that's where some of his issues was lying, because he was taking people's money to initially pay for these initial ones, but then they were delayed because a lot of these companies were building for other people as well. And I think
Right.
it was just snowballing. It's funny when you look at the different tactics. Like, I suppose Solar would be another one. Would
Yes.
probably be actually a success.
Yeah.
It seemed to
But
keep
you do see
constantly winning.
loads of people like complaining about the QA on the solar
And
guitars, like
crack fretboards.
yeah, cracked fretboards. Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, yeah.
I've actually got one. And I have a
Oh,
few
really?
mates yeah, I've got a few mates that have them as well, and we've not had any issues. It seems to be an issue that it seems to be more of an issue that in America, hot, humid climates.
Yeah.
That's obviously like when they come out of the factory, when they're Indonesian made, when they come to the warehouse in Spain, and you QC it, and they're fine. How are you going to know when you're QCing it there in there that they're going to crack when they go somewhere else? Like, they're obviously not drying the wood out properly in the factory.
But
So
it-
like that's
Yeah, make it too fast.
But
Yeah,
it
yeah.
makes no sense because the just like the Chapman, just like pretty much everything nowadays, they're all made in the same factories by the same people, and most likely they're going to be QC'd by the same people. So why would Solar have that problem and not Chapman and not, I don't know?
Some people
weird.
some people say the reason that apparently the percentage of their guitars that crack aren't any higher than any other companies. It's because they're a direct to customer from the company, and they're like an online based thing, so you're hearing more of it. Whereas if you had say you had a Jackson, it happened to a Jackson, you would just take it back to the shop and they just give you another one.
Yeah.
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 Solar, because you're buying direct, you're then having to contact the company, and then there's all these Facebook groups, people in and just put it up there first before they've even necessarily resolved it. So I think that's why you're hearing more about it as well.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah. Apparently, their percentage of them, the damaged ones, aren't in what's considered normal in the industry. They're not any higher than anyone else's at all. You're just hearing the echo chambers because of how they sell them.
Well, that's the internet, though, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
it's what you always say. It's like, people never talk about it on the internet when they have a guitar and it's no problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But the minute something happens and it goes wrong, you got 100 people ranting on the internet saying,
Yeah.
"Oh, it's the end of the world. It's terrible." Yeah, yeah,
Well, if you bought it from your local guitar store, you would just go in there and hand it back, and they
yeah,
just give you another one. But
yeah,
because you're buying for the most part direct from Solar, you're having to wait for it to come from Spain. And if you have an issue, you have to contact the customer support, get it shipped back. So there's a lot of back and forth with it to try and resolve the issue. Whereas if you bought it from a store, you just go there, take that back, give me that one. And
yeah.
I think
Interestingly, that's why it's like if I was of a mind to buy a Chapman guitar, I wouldn't actually feel that bad about it because I'd probably be buying it through Andertons, and
yeah,
like Andertons have this massive warehousing capacity, so they could just
yeah,
replace it out of hand. And
yeah,
their customer service is, well, tends to be, in my experience at least, has been very, very good.
yeah,
So,
same.
yeah.
Yeah, but they'd be the one that I could think of almost the opposite to Abasi. The way he went about it is that way, and
Yeah.
then first, and then maybe Mike go into the custom shop stuff eventually. But
It
yeah,
just always smacks of vanity project when it's like a custom shop thing where you want to establish yourself as like being, oh, we're proper luthiers, we make proper guitars,
yeah,
all that kind of stuff. It's like you've got to show that you can actually produce a bunch of. It's like that. Sorry, I got off on a tangent here, but it's like that whole thing about like about the process of learning. How you have you have a class and a pottery class. You split it in half, and half of the class you say make 100 pots, and then the other half of the class you say make one pot but make the best pot you can make. And at the end of it, the half of the class that's made 100 pots is making better pots than the half of the class that focused on making the best pot possible, because it's just by repetition and iteration and making these pots over and over and over again. That resonates with me because I used to work in manufacturing, so it's like I was actually a buyer in procurement, so I kind of probably have a deeper understanding of supply chain issues than a lot of people. So,
yeah,
but yeah, it's true. You have to start with either you are actually a proper trained luthier and like a traditional luthier, and you're making like tiny batches or whatever, and that's what you do anyway, and so you can go down
yeah,
that road. But I think someone like Toasty Nabasti, who's just like a guitar player,
yeah,
to
exactly. Yeah, yeah. There's a big difference in being a player and a builder.
exactly, yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
Formula One mechanics don't jump in the car and then race it, do they?
No,
Yeah, I mean the
well,
problem is that
I'd hate to see that.
the problem is always like he would have to rely on so many others to all do their part properly.
Yeah.
So
It did get funny when he started throwing shade at Grover Jackson. Like, the guy's legendary in the industry. He's worked for how many companies and has his own
Yeah,
brands. And Justin
that,
Avasi's making it look like he built them, but he had to take them somewhere else to get them painted. And it's like, what the? I think Grover Jackson, from what I remember, was building the Friedman guitars. So they'd have been
yes,
putting bigger orders in than obviously Abasi would. So that's where he was getting impatient, and then he was just taking them out to paint. But
yeah,
trying to
because
make that,
everyone wanted a Friedman guitar, right? Because they were so
yeah,
good. Because
yeah.
they were just like, they. I mean, I'd have a Friedman guitar if I mean, if I had the money or whatever, because they just look amazing.
I'm sure Grover Jackson was building them.
Yeah, it probably was. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
um so I like the vice versa one, but we didn't really pick up on any of that, did we? What?
A product that we thought would fail, but actually ended up being successful.
Well, you mentioned a few, but I can't think of
Yeah.
anything.
I'm struggling. To be honest, amp sims are way better than I thought they were going to be. I mean, I was very skeptical for quite a while, and now it's all I use in the house. I I tube amps in the studio. I don't use amps in the house anymore.
Yeah, it's
I've
like
kind of gone through. I've kind of come out the other side of that one, if I'm honest, because I've been using amp sims since I bought a Digitech RP 2000 in 1998, right? and that had like probably the first like amp emulations in it, and I was using it to record with, and I mean terrible sounding recordings because it was it was 25 years ago and I was terrible at it, but then the minute it came out, like I started using like guitar rig and all that kind of stuff, and then I was using Amplitube, and then I do still use the Neural DSP plugins. I've got the 14 Kali suite, and I have the what's it called? It's Archetype Nolly one, and I also record bass using the Dark Glass pedal one, and they are very, 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 very good. But there's something about them that kind of forces you into this kind of production line way of producing, and just lately it's like because I don't have any amps in here or anything like that, but just lately I've really thought very hard about starting to use proper guitar amps again, because I feel like I'm losing the discipline of actually recording audio. Do you know what I mean? I feel like I want to kind of challenge myself to actually make a guitar amp sound good and get a microphone in front of it, record some air moving, and I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's just a personal thing, but to me it will feel like it makes my recordings feel a little bit more legitimate, if you see what I'm saying. I don't know.
I don't produce to that level. I just use them mainly for writing.
Yeah.
Um, I
Oh,
do.
they're
I do.
amazing tool for like making
Yeah.
demos and that kind of incredible. Yeah, yeah, so good.
Like I still use tube amps when I'm at practice and stuff
Mm.
and writing with the guys. And as you said, it was spoke earlier. It's hard to tell the difference in the sound anymore, but you can feel it in your picking.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, when you're playing, it's a different experience completely. Yeah.
It's definitely big difference in the feel of them. But it's amazing how much better the sound has got.
Well, that's a good example then, right? So because these software, these VSTs were getting like so popular, and because they were getting so good, I thought when like people started making these the two notes captor.
I've got one.
Yeah. So when
I've
people
got
started
one.
making those, and there are some of them I mean, some of them cost like 200 quid, but there are like the Oxbox. I thought, who's going to want that? Because it's like, why would you want that in your studio? Because you could just use a plugin. But it's like, no, people want to plug their heads into the thing and then not use a cab. They want to just have this cab emulation going through. To my mind, it was like, well, if you're going to have cab emulation, why would you want to use the amp head in the first place? Why not just use a VST of it? Because it's going to be the same, right? But no, people, and then so that's something I thought would just be a fad, and it turns out that people have properly taken it
I
on.
I'm planning on using mine live for sending to front of house and to the in-ear system. So I'm not
Yeah,
gonna. I'll still be using the cab on stage, but not bothering micing it anymore. So I'll have custom IRs loaded into it. And there's two outputs at the back, so one to front of house and one to the in-ears. See,
yeah,
even bands. I was watching a rig rundown on the Fishman site from Trivium, and
yes,
they've gone back. They've gone back to full tube heads with the two notes from the Kempers. And there's
yeah,
two live they have six cabs each on stage, two live, but no mics on any cabs at all.
yeah.
They've went back from the Kempers back to real amps. So you're starting to see that starting to happen again now. People, some of the big at that level are starting to go back to amps a bit, or sometimes they're using the Axe effects with the four cable method with the amps for all
Yeah.
the effects and switching as well. You're seeing kind of hybrid rigs as well.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to sort of square. I was using a Helix for a while, and it was extremely practical because you can do everything with it. You know, it's just an amazing system. And I was initially I was using it with just like a power amp, and then I started using it with the Marshall JMP1 and just getting my amp sounds out of the JMP1, but using it for effects and all that kind of stuff. And then I just ended up getting rid of it and going back to a regular pedal board because it's just like I don't know. Even I don't even know if it was really a sound thing. I'm not sure if it was like, I don't think I was ever necessarily unsatisfied with the way it sounded. It just didn't feel like it was real. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
No,
maybe option
Yeah.
paralysis.
well, that's one thing. The options become too much, which means that you keep chasing while you've got that unit or that VST or whatever. But
I found the opposite actually. I found like it was, I didn't chase at all. I got one thing set up and then I just didn't think about it anymore. And in a way, that's the opposite of what I'm about, because I'm always tone chasing. But if I have real hardware, then I'll always be tweaking it. But I for some reason that Helix, it just set up my presets and then just didn't touch them ever again because I just wasn't interested. And I think that's it. It didn't stimulate me.
Well, that was the second point I was going to make about it. It's the stimulation part that's lacking when it comes to using these multi-effects floor units or Kempers or anything like that. There is, I mean, the whole part of the reason I suppose people play guitar is because they are tactile people. They like to play with things. They like to, you know, have something in their hands. They like to fiddle with knobs. Jesus, like everything I said is bad, but like, like, but so, there is also this thing, like I'm experiencing this right now because we've got all the drum tracks done.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get the guitar to sound the way it sounds in the fucking jam room. And it doesn't, and it won't, no matter what I do, no matter what tricks I pull. I cannot get that tone. And part of it has to do with the fact that you've got a two big amps set up in stereo in an enclosed space at 5. And there is resonance from every single thing, from the cab head all the way down to the cab itself, to the speakers. Everything does its little bit of additional interaction. And
yeah,
although I can get like the bass tone of what I want the guitar to sound like recorded, there is that additional atmosphere. To be fair, at the moment we're not trying to do some super technical, precise metal stuff, so I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in that growl, that ambience, that movement of air, as you said, that rattle of shit that you just don't get it. You have to mic up a cab. You have to mic up a cab in this situation to get that, or even get close to it, to get the feedback that you want. You want that saturated, you know, all-encompassing feedback that you can get in a jam room. These are the things that are lacking from VSTs, not because they can't do it, but because the way that you use them don't allow you to get to that point in the first place.
Yeah,
So I don't have anything
it's
against them.
it's the workflow.
There's also a different element, a different mindset. You say, okay, I'm gonna go into the studio for 2 days and record X, Y, and Z. And in that studio, I have this and this amp, and I've got these options with mics, and I've got somebody to help me, and we can get to some conclusion. And there's a whole kind of mentality around that, to going, you know what, I can probably record those guitars at home, and Amplitude will do just fine. It's two different things. It's two different things. The whole creative process, the whole kind of mindset, the enjoyment. I don't know, man. Like,
Do you think, like, so? I mean, I'm just gonna throw us all under the bus right now. Do you think it's like a generational thing? Because we all grew up, right? We're all old enough that kind of there is a part of our lives where the way people made records was going to a studio with all real instruments, no software, no nothing, and throwing up microphones in front of them, and maybe even recording them just to tape or whatever. And so that's kind of our original idea of what it was to make a record. And so in a sense, it's like we get to the point where it's possible to make a record in your back bedroom using just a laptop, but it never feels real to us. But there might be people now who like grow up with, you know, that, you know, they hear people say, oh, well, you know, what's her name? Billie Eilish recorded the Bond theme, you know, on a laptop in someone's back bedroom. You know,
no, it doesn't.
Is that
That doesn't bother me at all, and I don't think that's my personal issue. One of the reasons is we're not the first ones to do this. Like, was it Boston that literally set up his own a studio in his basement and recorded that first album.
Yeah.
Fair enough, it was,
Yeah,
but,
yeah,
but he
yeah.
did it himself. He just didn't have the same tools we did. He had more kind of analog tools. Fair enough, but there were many people who did this kind of stuff before. The what is the something bells? There was another guy, the French guy. He did
Tubular
everything.
bells. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're not the first ones to do it. I think it has to do with you have to understand what music you're actually trying to do and what you're trying to convey. If there, I think most of the stuff you can comfortably do in your own bedroom, in your own head, on your laptop. I don't have any issue with that. In fact, I think that is one of the things that we've not really talked about is how much more music has come out because it's possible, and a lot of it's good. There's shit in there. There's good stuff in there. It's all over the show. But what's more important is that people can now get their ideas down at a really decent quality, a quality high enough that it could play on radio. All right. So
yeah, it frequently does, right? You know, these days it's like so much of
exactly.
it.
What I'm that we spoke about this last time. I always have something specific in my head, and when you chase that something specific and it is not possible in the means that you've got, that's when you get frustrated. And so I think it depends. Like you couldn't do. I'll give you an example. You could do really good death metal in your bedroom, right? But you couldn't do another In Utero record or a Pixies record.
Definitely, yeah.
That's kind of what I'm getting at.
So what's the distinction in your mind? Is it just aesthetics, or is it like a process?
I think in those cases there's a few things that play. There is the people that you do this with. There is also the tools don't allow you the same that analog allowed you to do, or kind of forced you to do.
Yeah.
There is just certain things that don't translate in a VST that do when you're in the studio miking stuff up. For example, this is, I keep saying this, but you know, it's one of the most obvious ones. Absolute natural feedback recorded from the amp and your guitar.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
it's a classic thing, but it is something that you can't get. All these little overtones that you get if you mic up your amp with, you know, with a room mic and close mics. The same with drums, right? The way that it's recorded to have a more of a feeling. And I don't listen to any music on my phone, like with my phone in front of me. I listen if I have my old hi-fi on or I have good headphones on. So I always hear as much as possible that was recorded. So if you then listen to all the stuff that was done in the studio, especially certain stuff, there is a certain additional tones that are not present in modern day music, partly because of the technology and partly because of the way that it is deemed to record stuff, that everything has to be crystal clean and perfectly cut and, you know, overproduced. I mean, obviously there's both parts to play there. So I certainly don't have a problem. I'm not going to criticize, you know, doing records in your bedroom, because I've done it. But there's a certain, the things that always lacking in everything I've done so far are things that I would not have been able to do unless I went into a studio, for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe takes away some of the happy accidents as well. So like if you're micing something and you change the placement, something's not quite right, and you accidentally stumble upon something that sounds really interesting. Maybe takes away some of that as well. I watch German producer Christian Kola, and he talks about that a bit. He's a master at dialing in tones. Metal bands send him tracks for reamping all the time, and he's a big collection of amps, and he has a Kemper, and he's profiled all his own amps, but he stopped doing that years ago. He said that find that he might have profiled an amp, and then down the line, he might use that same amp for another band and it would sound the same. Whereas if he actually used the same amp and the same mic and the same cab on those two projects, it wouldn't sound the same because the mic might be a millimeter away and things.
When I was cutting our last record, and I was tracking with our bass player, and he's a bit anally retentive, to say the least. And so we were using his he's got a dark glass head, so we were DIing out of that, and so we were cutting a track, and he was like, "Do you want to make a note of the settings? You know, just so you know what the settings were for this, just in case we need to retake anything." And I think I didn't even think about it. I think my initial reaction was just to say, you know what? It's like, no, because if we have to come back to it, we'll just find another great bass tone.
Yeah.
It's like, fuck what it was. It doesn't matter what it was. It's like, but if we get to it then we'll make a decision then, and we'll get another great tone then. So it's like the idea of, you know, obsessively kind of, you know, formalizing everything into this is what this sounds like, this is what that sounds like, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't. I think you're right. I think what you're talking about really is sort of spontaneity, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can even like put your templates together in Reaper, like so that, you know, everything is the same as you did last. You know what I mean? Everything becomes no, it's brilliant and it's super useful. But I think a lot of times, I can only speak for myself in this occasion. Like, the reason I record things and do this channel and build pedals and play guitar in the first place was because I have an interest in all these things. I want to fuck around with all the stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about playing guitar or just this or just that. It's about this whole, dare I say, lifestyle, or endless pit of despair. I don't know which one.
It's an obsession with making things. You always have to be making something. I think that's it for me. I think that's the core of it. Every hobby I've ever had, whether it's photography or, you know, music or painting or whatever it is, it's like it's always been about making something that didn't exist before.
But
and I think the minute I start trying to automate the process, as in like with templates or any other form of like making things quicker so I can get things set up quicker or whatever, I just find that it kills some of the vibe for me. It just feels like I'm not as in the process as I was before.
Yeah.
You know.
The other thing.
I'm
sorry.
No, I was just gonna say I'm always suspicious of things that are just designed to make things easier for no other reason than to make them easier.
Yeah. I mean, here's something that popped in my head. Like, if you go into a studio, onto a jam space or whatever, and you dial your amp in that day and it just sounds amazing, you go, fuck, that sounds great, right?
Yeah.
If you dial in your amp to sound really good on the computer, you go, cool, that's good. I'm happy with that.
Yep.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
Like, this is fucking amazing, and you'll stand there and bask in its glory for a while. Whereas in the amp sim, you'll be like, okay, this is good. Yeah, let's go. There's a passion difference between the two of them. And this
100%.
And I'm not dissing either. I'm not dissing the digital stuff because I find it extremely liberating. So,
yeah, great songwriter. I use both all the time now.
Yeah. I think the only time I've ever used digital stuff and like been like, holy shit, this is fucking amazing, it's when I've say for instance, like I don't do a lot of electronic music, but like what I used to do, like in the very early days when like plugins were only just starting to become a thing, it's like when I got some kind of software or something that made a noise or whatever, the first thing I'd do is try and break it. Like make it make a noise that it wasn't supposed to make, like push it to its full extreme, and then try and use that. And that was when I got excited about it, because it was like a totally unexpected thing, and then you had to make use of it. But the idea of like, downloading a VST of something and then using a preset and then just using that and being happy with it just seems like total anathema to me, because there's none of, like, every part of the process should have something of you in it, where even if it's like some boring part of the process, like, positioning a microphone in front of a fucking speaker or whatever, it's like, because you did that, you made the decision. It's not some guy who's gone, well, this is the optimized position to put this particular speaker, of like some kind of animation or whatever, and like some GUI. Yeah, it takes more. It takes, every time you do that, it takes more of you out of the process, and it takes it upstreams of whoever designed the piece of software.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
We can talk for hours about this, honestly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep, never-ending topic.
Yeah.
So I remember just a wee story. Like, so when I just got out of college, I started working for a newspaper, and this was 96. Started working for a newspaper, and there was a guy that worked with me, and he studied economics and something like that, economics and business or something like that. At the same time, this was obviously after the apartheid era and South Africa becoming a proper full democracy, and sanctions and everything being lifted in South Africa. So what happened was we had a brewery which made most of our beers. Like in Scotland, we would say the equivalent of Tennents and stuff like that. They were like the Carling and the Tennents, and they did that stuff. They were called SA breweries, right? And they were quite obviously not small, but they were basically just like a national kind of company. And so these guys, as part of their economics course in uni, they were told to mock invest in a company. So they need to do their research and then, buy shares in a company and see how it goes. So they mock invested $3,000 when they were studying. Within 3 or 4 years, that company grew to be like one of the biggest drinks manufacturers in the world now. So within 3 or 4 years of that, by the time he was working with me, he would have made the 300,000 would have been worth the 3,000 would have been around 300,000, right? The reason I'm mentioning this because, like, maybe the question, the next one shouldn't have been like, if you had money to invest in a company or product, what would it be? It should have been, what should it have been? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, Boss Pedals, or I don't know, JHS, if they ever went public or something.
Yeah.
Or Kemper.
Rural
Well-
DSG now.
Yeah.
Yeah, they must be doing okay.
Yeah.
I would say it's weird because it's like, FMIC, Fender Musical Instrument Company, they've done okay business wise, but it's like, I think a lot of people would have probably said, like Gibson went bust, what, 4 years ago now, didn't they? So
Almost, yeah.
yeah, Strymon for me, because it's like they came onto the market and it's just like every rig rundown, everyone's got the Strymon Timeline, the Strymon Big Sky, and the Strymon Mobius on their fucking pedalboard. Every last fucking guitar player has those three things. My guitar player in my band, he's got those three things on his pedalboard. It's like they must have sold billions of those pedals, and they're so expensive. But it's like everyone buys them because they are thought of as being the best in the business, and I mean they probably are because they're great. So it's like they really nailed it.
You know, a good company to invest in would have been Marshall, because they now make everything except amps.
That's true, yeah.
Fridges, everything. They just.
Yeah, well, those little Marshall speakers, isn't it? And the headphones and whatnot. The Bluetooth Marshall Bluetooth speakers.
Yeah.
They're not even Marshall. They're just made by some random place in China or whatever. It's not like they're made in Bletchley.
Yeah.
A bit like the amps then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
But
yeah.
on that vein, you could also argue with all the Chinese pedal builders, the Donners and the Joyos and NUX and all of those, because they
I would have,
also.
I would have invested in Thomann when they first started.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andertons.
Yeah, true. Yeah, yeah.
Sweetwater, big one in America now, isn't it? Everyone's raving about.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
There was a video I was watching the other day, and somebody, they were talking. Oh, it was actually their own video, and they were talking about how to order if you're from the US. And I'm thinking, like, if I'm in the US, why the actual fuck would I order from Andertons if I can order from
Guitar Center, yeah,
Sweetwater
something
or
like that.
Guitar Center or Amazon or whatever? It's just like, why?
Yeah.
But okay, I mean, please go ahead. It's just a really strange one for me. Really weird. I mean, I've only ordered one thing from Thomann and I've only done that, not done anything more, because I'm like, why? I don't want to wait. Because they still have heavy waiting times if you compare it to, most places here.
True.
I don't know. Probably some of.
I bought off Thomann. I found Thomann very fast, actually. Anytime I bought off them.
Well, I actually can't remember if I actually ordered something or if it's just when you go through the ordering process and it has like an expected delivery time.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's weird. I used to buy from them like, several times a month or whatever. And then there was that whole thing during because of the whole Brexit thing where, all of a sudden it was like there wasn't the VAT calculator and everything. And during that time, I just didn't buy anything from them because I didn't know what the score was.
Yeah.
And since then, I haven't bought anything from them. Not because it's not, I mean, it's resolved now or anything, but it's just for some reason I just don't buy anything from them anymore. I don't know why. I mean, I haven't really had cause to, but at the same time, it's like I just don't do it. It's strange.
They tend to be the ones, like, if you're looking for something, they tend to be the last ones who actually have something of that weird thing that you're looking for.
Well, yeah, that's true. They do have probably the biggest catalog, so they have all the weird, random little shit that you're looking for. But I don't know. I'm one of those people. I tend to find a lot of that stuff on eBay, if I'm honest. Just those random, weird little things, those little adapters or connectors or whatever you're looking for. I always go to eBay because it's like a lot of the time that's where you'll find it, and it'll usually be on 2 to 3 day delivery, and it'll usually be like £1 less than wherever it is elsewhere. But I have to encourage people to buy things through Andertons, but only if I've given them my affiliate link first, because I'm an Andertons affiliate. Do you know how much money I've made from being an Andertons affiliate? I've made 33 pence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a Donner affiliate. I've made nothing. So
all right.
I was hoping that my youngest piano videos, which there aren't a lot of, would make people buy the same Donner piano that I got her, which is amazing. I can't fucking fault this thing. It was unbelievable. It's got weighted keys. It sounds great. Because just one of those purchases would actually be a half decent percentage. You know what I mean? No, I think the best ones to have invested in were actually, I think we've mentioned some of it, but like a lot of these Ampsum guys. Not the big ones like Amplitude stuff, but all the kind of, smaller ones like Neural and all those guys.
Yeah.
Neural, the guy behind Neural is also the guy behind Darkglass.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that could make sense.
That would have been a good one to invest in.
Yeah, I got into Darkglass because the bass player from Carnival plays Darkglass, and he has just, I don't know if you've heard Sound Awake by Carnival, but it's one of the best bass tones on a record I've ever heard. So good.
The bass player in my band uses all Darkglass stuff.
Yeah.
He got the head. He has a head in a cab, and he has that photon pedal.
Yes.
It's actually quite amazing what some of the stuff that pedal does is outrageous.
Yeah,
You can turn up and play live just with that.
Yeah. But I think that the quality of the sound is there, and I think that's the important part of it. Is
Yeah.
you don't feel like it's there's no kind of
They're amazing, absolutely amazing.
yeah.
Mm. Yeah, they probably would have been in terms of the amp sims. They're probably dominating now the neural stuff, isn't it?
Victory amps. I would have invested in Victory amps
That's a good one.
again if they're public.
Yeah.
Yeah, because their amps are fucking amazing. Really,
Never,
really.
never tried one.
So I have a Kraken, and my guitar player's just bought a Super Kraken, and they are just they're remarkable in terms of how good they are. They're not cheap, but at the same time, I mean, they're very. There's nothing there that you don't want. There's no like, what am I doing with this part, whatever. It's just like it's everything you'd want in an amp, and then nothing else. And I think that's really refreshing.
Yeah.
And obviously, I mean that the Kraken stuff is like the sort of the modern metal stuff. But if you talk to some of the guys who have got the kind of the more bluesier stuff, the V30s and Duchesses and everything like that, they're all there's no one saying, "Oh, I'm really unhappy with this amp that I bought." Everyone's like, "This is incredible."
Yeah,
You know?
I've only ever heard good things about them.
Yeah, yeah,
I haven't met. I actually know someone that has one. I haven't heard him playing it in years, but yeah, I do know one
yeah,
person that has one.
yeah.
They
No,
also
they're just great.
they also look great. I mean, it's we were talking about innovation earlier, but I think some of the innovation that we've seen over the last, I'm gonna say 15 years, not 10, has been like quite subtle, just by new companies and some of the things they've done. A lot of the stuff was not like these massive leaps, but just I'm thinking about Friedman amps, Victory amps, stuff like that. Some of the smaller guys that do cabs.
Yeah,
I think a lot of the
Rev Amps is another one. Canadian company,
yeah,
Rev.
Rev
I think they
amps.
were the first. I think they were the first ones that started incorporating the two note stuff into the back of the amp.
yeah. That's true. Yeah, yeah. Actually, just in terms of like little innovations, it's like I mean, I don't even know if you could talk about it in terms of an innovation, but it's like the guy from Mozilla Cabs. I mean, he's made his cabs are like everyone's happy to pay £800 for a 2x12, and it's like
Yeah.
it's the same speakers in, it's like a pair of Celestions, it's a well-made cab, all that kind of stuff, but it's like very expensive because it says Zilla on it. It's like everyone's happy with that, and I had one for a while and it was great, but it's like in a way, it's like it's such a strange model because it's like you can buy other cabs that aren't that expensive. So
I
why
think
is everyone
I think he timed it well when starting to downsize and 212s became cool. Like bands like Periphery, funnily enough. I think he
Yeah,
was right place, right time with it. There's a guy in Airdrie in Scotland called Half Nine Cabs. That actually makes 212s as well. And I bought a cab off him years ago. It wasn't one of his own built ones. I just wanted one for the house. And when I went to pick it up, he had a Zilla there.
yeah,
That he was changing the speakers out for something else for someone. And he actually gave me a right good look at the Zilla compared to his. And his was far superior build quality than theirs. Even the wiring was way higher quality.
yeah,
So yeah, they're just I've never tried a Zilla, and I've never heard anything bad about them.
yeah. I mean, it was fine. It was a good cab, but the thing is, it's actually very difficult to kind of say what's a good cab. I mean, a bad cab obviously is a cab that sounds like shit, but most people they don't know a good cab from a really good cab because
Yeah,
people don't generally have a lot of experience of cabs. Most guitar
yeah.
players will have had like one or two guitar cabs or whatever, and they can't, because people don't spend a lot of time thinking about that kind of stuff. So it's just a case of people don't really know, but they think they ought to have a good one, and then people say, "Well, Zillas are good," and they go, "All right, well, I'll get one of them then," and they'll pay
Do
a
you think
lot of
though?
money.
Do you think it's only in recent times people are starting to realize the importance of the speaker and the cab? Probably from IRs is probably helping us understand that more. Like,
Yeah,
cabs always up until recent times, from my experience with a lot of guitar players, a cab was almost an afterthought. You just thought a cab's a cab, which isn't the case at all. It's actually maybe the most important part of the signal chain.
yes, Yeah, I think you're right that it's like it's a recent thing because people are
Yeah,
talking about that kind of thing more and people are understanding it more because of
yeah.
actually probably interestingly because of cab emulations.
Because of the
Because
IRs, yeah.
because of IRs, people are going, oh, there is a difference. There is a real
Yeah,
difference between this versus that. And even like a V30 from 10 years ago and a V30 from 5 years ago or
yeah,
whatever. It's people doing that kind of stuff and going to that level of detail that's made people understand there is really a difference between, because the thing is, I prefer playing a 4x12 over a 2x12
same, same.
because you get more air moving, you get more bass response, you get just a bigger sound through the 4x12. Um, but again, I think for most people, it's like it's not necessarily something that they've spent a lot of time thinking about. At the same time, I think a 2x12 records better than a 4x12. Um, but it depends on the kind of music you're making, also, I suppose.
Yeah,
But it's yeah, but it's also I would say it's another thing for people to sniff corks over, and I think that's a big part of it as well because it's like once you've got really anal about your guitar and your pickups and your strings, and then you've got really anal about the amps that you use and the valves you put in them, and you've got really anal about your pedal board and all that kind of stuff, and then you can get really anal about the cab, and I think that's sort of the last thing that people kind of everyone wants to get really anal about like every part of it, and the cab is like, well, I can't use a Celestion V30. I have to use a Cannabis Rex, or I have to use a Creamback, or I have to use a Greenback, or I have to, I can't. I need a ported 2x12 for my sound. I can't use a 4x12 or a two 1x12s or whatever.
Yeah, but I
You know.
I think the it's now changing to a point where the argument is like, first you worry about your guitar, then you worry about your cab, then you worry about your amp, then you worry about your pedals, in that order, about hierarchy of what's most influential to your tone, I
Yeah.
suppose, is where they're going. And then they're probably gonna take their guitar and their cab and everything into a recording studio. Then they're gonna mic up the guitar cab, get a great tone out of it, record that, but secretly there's a fucking DI running as well, straight from the guitar. And then once the
Yeah.
guitarist is out, he's fucking putting
Yeah.
Amplitube on there and reamping it for some other shit.
yeah.
Yeah.
Guaranteed.
That's it. And all the snares are samples and all the kick drums are samples.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting you say that because it's like the narrative at the moment. I've noticed this in a lot of YouTube videos I'm seeing lately. Is that like people are starting to say stuff like, "Oh yeah, well all overdrive pedals are just the same. All tube screamers are the same, and all clone clones sound the same, and you can't tell the difference between a clone that costs you £100 and a real clone that costs you £5,000."
Yeah, but I will
And
go.
all
I will go quite far in agreeing with that. But it's not because the individual items sound the same. That's not the problem. And this is the fucking thing
yeah,
that everybody misses. It's the fact that once you've recorded something and you've processed it in a mix, the fucking thing
yeah,
sounds the same. That is where the problem lies. But
I think you're right.
when you listen to the different pedals and where their EQ curves sit and where their kind of grit sits, and the different amps and how especially different amps and different pedals, how they interact, there's massive difference. But once you've gone through that process of recording something and squashed it through every fucking VST that you can find, and mastered and mixed it, that's when they all sound the same. It's like I remember.
This is what worries me about it. Sorry, go on.
I will remember when Ola, both Ola and the CS guitar guy, the guy from Scotland, what's his name? Colin, yeah.
Colin Scott.
They were both accused that their tone always sounds the same.
Yeah.
And it's kind of true. It does always sound the same. But that's because actually the sound that people chasing is usually roughly the same within margins of each other, right?
Yep.
And that's also why I got so annoyed, agreeing but annoyed with the whole Glenn Fricker going on about the valves don't matter and this, but it's all speaker. And then yeah, fair enough, he's a metal channel, but the tone differences really come to life when you when you play at the cleans and the breaking up and the overdrive, but not when you start going into high gain shit. It really is more about can your thing do high gain than it is what kind of high gain does it do.
Yeah, once you're there, once you've got that massive hyper compressed kind of mid-rangey, punchy, high gain sound, it's like it doesn't matter what it is. It just sounds the way it sounds. This is why I'm always worried about sort of the legitimacy of the YouTube videos that I make, because ultimately it's like I'm there to show you, like, yeah, what this stuff looks like, but also what it sounds like. And at the end of it, I find like so much of what I record ends up sounding like the same as everything else I've recorded. I did this video where I did this comparison between a custom shop Les Paul, so a 1958 custom shop Les Paul, a recent, like a 2020 Les Paul Standard, and an Epiphone Les Paul Standard. And I deliberately processed them exactly the same. So I set up everything the same and I put them through the same channels, and it's just like I didn't tweak. The EQs were exactly the same. Everything was exactly the same. And all the guitars sounded basically the same. So you had this one guitar that nowadays you could probably buy for like £4,000, and then this other guitar that the equivalent you could probably buy it for like, I don't know, £400 or £500, and they sounded basically the same on this recording. And it's like I've had them in a rehearsal space and I've heard them next to each other, and they don't sound the same. But that's the problem, is when you're in this studio environment and you're recording stuff in a studio environment, and then you're mixing it and then you're uploading it to YouTube. If you watch the video, you'll be like, if you watch that video looking for advice on which you should buy, I can't imagine anyone listening to that if they were judging it in just 100% on what the guitar sounded like. I mean, anyone with you know, any sane person would be like, I'll just buy the Epiphone. But they're not the same. You know, they don't sound the same, and I think that's the problem. As I in recording them, I was unable to actually communicate what the differences were. You know, I think that's kind of problematic. I think from the point of view of a YouTuber.
I agree, but yet you wouldn't be able to get away with trying to get anything out the door unless somebody has some sort of reference to it, i.e. a sound sample of it, even though it is probably completely unnatural, then especially within his own context and how he might use it. I mean, I'm talking about, let's say, a guitar pedal demo or an amp demo or a guitar demo. It's like,
yeah,
you have to do it, but at the same time you realize that it actually in the big it doesn't really mean much. It doesn't really say a lot.
Yeah.
Not enough anyway.
It's why, yeah. So I basically, I think going forward, it's like I kind of want to get away from the whole idea of comparisons, because I find that although it seems to be a popular thing, such and such versus such and such, it's like they're never really conclusive, and all they ever seem to achieve is proving that cheap thing sounds just about as good as expensive thing. And it's like no one leaves that any the wiser. So I think it's like every demo I do going forward has to be about evaluating the thing for what it is. Just going, okay, well, this is it, and it sounds like this, you know, rather than saying, well, is it better or worse than the other thing, you know, because I don't think that's helpful.
Well, there's been a shift, in my opinion. Like when I first started in 2014 trying to like get some videos up and going, I did all these demos of shitty pedals, and your whole mindset was like, well, somebody can't see the pedal but wants to buy one, so what does he need to know about this pedal? So he obviously needs to have some sort of idea that the thing works. It has to be plugged in, it has to be played, but they want to know about the construction. They want to know about, you know, more details about it. Does it feel heavy? Does it feel like it's going to break? You know, does the switch sound good? So there were all these things that you did. You do those kind of reviews nowadays, and people are bored within 30 seconds. They want you to sit in the flashy studio with a fancy animated title and then playing some really complicated fucking riff that, you know. And
because they're thinking about buying that thing, and they want you to convince them to do it, by looking cool while you're playing it.
Well, that's obviously another reason, but I think the main reason is because the YouTube demo and YouTuber in the guitar world has gotten such leaps and bounds from where they were. Shitty video quality,
Yeah.
no intros, just some guy, fucking around with shit he likes to do, to now kind of polished, edited videos, and people, I suppose, still gravitate to that and see that to be like, if the video quality is not like that, then how can the pedal be good, or how can the pedal demo be good, or useful?
Do you remember a guy like years ago who used to demo like overdrive pedals? He was called Gearman Dude, and he sounded exactly like Jack Black.
Yeah. And it was always just the top view of the pedal.
Yeah, exactly. And he just basically played, and all the pedals sounded exactly the same, all of them. He thousands and thousands of individual videos of him demoing these overdrive pedals, and all the overdrive pedals sounded basically the same. And it was just like, it was very watchable, but mainly because he sounded precisely like Jack Black. But but at the same time, I don't think anyone really was able to make any kind of serious decisions based on those videos, but it was content of a sort. But I think you're right in the sense that nowadays that wouldn't fly, because it was just, he might as well have been recording it on like a smartphone or something like that. There was no production value to it.
Yeah.
This is not the greatest pedal in the world. It's a tribute.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Honestly, check him out. Gearman Dude. The guy sounds precisely like Jack Black. It's fucking hilarious.
All that stuff still is quite watchable, even when he does demos, because he does very specific things. Like, for example, he always has a lot of different mics on it. You can see exactly what kind of amp and cab he's got, so you can make some sort of in your head ideas of what's happening. And then he cycles through his mix and the different mics and what they picked up. That gives a bit of an interesting overview. Or the does it chug thing, actually, I think is one of the best ideas, because for a certain type of player and a certain type of tone chasing, that's really all you care about. Does this thing fucking do what I need it to do? Yes or no? Does it do it easily?
Does it do that when I palm mute?
Or do I have to, like, I don't know, get extra gear just to make it do that? I think some of his stuff was really like clever, and I think that's why he is kind of one of the favorites for me at the moment.
Yeah. He's very endearing. He's funny as fuck too, which helps. He's entertaining to watch.
He it doesn't seem like a lot of the ones that started out small and grew, they all feel as if YouTube has not gone to their head, but they kind of fell into that same YouTuber kind of trap that everybody does. Which is fine, but he doesn't seem like that kind of happened to him. But that's because he's Nordic, so.
Also because he has his fingers in lots of different pies. He's not reliant on YouTube for his living.
Yeah.
So if you know, he doesn't have any endorsements anymore or anything anymore. And there's been a couple of demos lately he's shied away from doing until all the other YouTubers had done theirs. Like so that he could tell you what he honestly thought. Like that Jackson American series soloist.
Yeah.
They were like pushing people. Have you seen the amount of ad campaigns they've done on that guitar?
Yeah.
Every artist on the roster that doesn't even play it has made a video for it on the Jackson YouTube channel, and then any other channel you could think of, including people that wouldn't even typically play that type of guitar.
Yeah.
The amount of marketing they've pushed on that, and he is doing one, but that is the price of it. Is it really worth the price? And it's very expensive, and it's not. And then they're getting some flack because it's not even an original Floyd Rose on it. For a guitar, it's nearly $3,000.
Yeah, it's like 1,000 series, isn't it? Something like that.
Or 1,500 or something like that.
Yeah.
Just because it's made in America.
What's a product that doesn't exist yet and you think will, or what you would invent if you could?
Ooh.
an attachment to your arm, right? That you can dial in the BPM for fucking downstrokes.
What the
Auto
head
downstroke,
fieldizer?
like, tuck, 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 tuck.
I think that you know how like someone designed the Plek machine to perfectly crown frets. I think that if someone designed a setup machine, because everyone like no one knows how to set up a guitar, right? Like very few people know how to properly set up a guitar, like how to adjust the neck, and then how to get correct neck relief, and then how to adjust the nut, and then how to adjust the bridge so you can get your strings perfectly flat and you can get low action, all that kind of stuff. So few people actually know how to do that properly. And so I think like the majority of guitar players around there who haven't availed the services of like a professional luthier or who don't have a guitar tech or whatever. I think a lot of people are playing guitars with like fucking awful action that are buzzing all over the place. Um, and are really unhappy with it and would like to do something about it, but haven't got the first clue of how to do it. I think if someone came up with some kind of system, that would be like the equivalent of, those things, those plugins that you get where you get like a microphone and it basically balances the sound for your recording studio. I think something that would be able to kind of analyze your guitar and then, based on that, tweak the truss rod, tweak the bridge, file down the nut, all that kind of stuff. Select your correct string gauge for the tuning you want it in to get the correct tension and all that kind of stuff. I think something that actually did that, I think that would be like, I think that would solve a real problem, and I think it'd make a fucking fortune.
There might actually be a much easier way to do that. That is, your phone, some of the apps can now do the 3D scanning of something. So if you've got a really high quality, high detail 3D scanner, that scan could then measure everything. Everything. It's basically like a Plek machine. And then it says, oh, you know what, the slots are too high or too low or whatever.
Yeah.
That might actually could actually work.
Yeah. But I think that's it, because I set up guitars a lot, if only just because I buy and sell guitars a lot. So, once or twice a month I have a new guitar, and every single time I'm putting different strings on it, or it just needs a setup anyway or whatever. And it's like, and every single time I just think like, how was this person who owned this before me playing this fucking thing? Because it's set up so badly, and it's like, and it's even worse if you have like a trem system on it, because then you have the angle of the trem and the height of the bridge and all that kind of stuff, and it's just like a nightmare.
Every single guitar that you pick up that is even good guitars in a pawn shop, you think, I know why this thing got sold.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was never set up.
Just 2 inches off the fretboard.
And they give you a slide with it. You can play slide guitar with it. Oh no,
I can't think of anything that hasn't been invented.
How about AI mastering? No, wait. Does that even work?
Yeah,
AI mastering. Is that a thing?
Not the last album, but the album before that, I wanted to see what it did different from what I did. So I sent some stuff through the AI thing, but you've got to pay for it. So what it does is it sends it through and then it gives you 30 seconds back. So I put them all through and just see what they kind of did. And every single one of them, fair enough, that album sounds completely different from anything else. So, but it made everything sound as if it's being played through a radio. That hyper compressed bass and high top end, kind of scoopy middle. It made
what I thought.
Everything sounded.
Yeah,
like
that's what I thought. Yeah. So I just brick wall limited everything and put a smiley face on it. Yeah.
Bingo. Absolutely. That was my experience. Fair enough. This was years ago.
What the fuck is the point? You could do that with presets and 2 plugins. What's the point of that?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
Did I try the one from Now SoundCloud now has one too. I don't know if I tried that one to see what it does, but I think if you write pop music, any kind of normal stuff, I think it's a godsend. I think it'll work every time. You just dump it through. But I think if you want to do anything beyond that, I think you're going to struggle.
Definitely.
It's
the one thing I resisted was like, because I mean, you know, I produce all my own stuff anyway, but it's like, so I don't really know how to master. I kind of muddle my way through it. But it's like there was a question when we put out our last record of whether we should pay someone to master it or whether I should just do it myself. And I said to my band, well, let me have a crack at it, and then we'll see if we want to spend hundreds of pounds on hiring someone else to do it. And then they were pretty happy with the results, so we stuck with what I'd done. But it just seemed to me like, you know, unless you've got a commercial record that you know, you've already spent 50 grand on producing, it just seems like a huge expense.
Well, I think people misunderstand where mastering came from in the first place. Mastering was more a way of making sure that it sounds right on an LP because of the limitations of LP. And it's really not that necessary anymore. If you got a good mix and it's well kind of compressed, it's not really necessary. And then the other thing that you can do is you can, you know, if there are some issues, usually they're better fixed in the mix, but they can be then addressed maybe in mastering and stuff like that. And nowadays you can argue that you need to master one for the idiot who stands at the bus stop listening to his music on his phone, never mind with earphones. To the vinyl that you want to press, to the tape that you might, and the CD and the stream. You know, you could argue that you might need mastering for the different scenarios, but I don't really think it's that necessary anymore, as long as it's a good thing. But one thing I can say is apparently the guys that really know what they're doing when they're mastering, they really know what they're doing. Because I'll give you an example. I can't remember which song it was, but one of mine that was pretty heavy on the drums and the distortion, I took a Rammstein song as a reference to see if I can master to that, you know, level. And I couldn't. This song was so loud and clipped, yet everything was crystal clear. Every single bit you could hear. There was no way that I managed to do that. But obviously there's also a massive lack in my mixing skills to be able to then have a print that you can then master to that. I mean, obviously. But still, it was...
I know how you feel.
Yeah, I don't know. But then again, on the other hand, my sensibilities about these things are different anyway. I do the things to my taste, and that's it. And if people don't like it, they don't like it, because there's nothing I can do about it.
Hard. You can never please everybody, so you might as well please yourself.
Yeah, I mean, hey, nobody's kidding anybody here. I'm old and grey, and you know, I'm not gonna, you know, go on a world tour with my roadies anytime soon. So I'll do this for myself, and that's it, for the joy. But it's interesting. I think that there's a lot of stuff that can be done to guitars nowadays. Now that especially for the likes of us who play more heavier stuff, where from an innovation point of view, things that can be, I don't want to say invented, but innovated, which is already happening, is the way guitars are built. That they can just be built. Like, with this weather we've been having, right? The guitars are always slightly out of tune, no matter what you do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's true.
So if you use different materials and you know, forget about tone wood, you're going to have a much better day. You know, carbon fiber and aluminium and think you can get a lot of stuff done better and more reliable and
What's
stronger.
that Dutch company? Aristides. They make some molds, isn't it? Theirs is made of their own composite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and it's just dipped in paint. So if you get one of their guitars and say it's red all the way through. So if you chip it, it's still red.
Yeah. Do you remember, like, it's actually one of the most affordable Ibanez guitars you can buy. They made guitars out of something. I think the guitars themselves were called ergodyne.
Yeah, the bases, they were made of lutite.
That's it, Luthite. Yeah. And it's like some composite material, and it's
They only
perfectly
ever
balanced throughout.
they
Yeah.
only ever done they only ever done it with bases though, and it was apparently
No, no,
crazy
no.
loud.
There's guitars that you can buy out of them as well.
Was there? I thought it was
Yeah,
just
if you
bases.
go on Reverb and you look for ergodyne guitars, you can pick them up for like 150 quid. It's like, it's like the value of the pickups and the fucking Floyd Rose on it. But you can get them for a handful of change because no one wants to buy them because they're not made out of wood.
But
Yeah.
I mean, surely with all the modern kind of composites that you find, the stuff can just be thrown into a mold nowadays. Surely.
Yeah.
That's what Aristides do, yeah.
I agree with you. I think that's really interesting actually. That's a whole subject in and of itself. It's like, why are we still so obsessed with guitars being made out of wood when we know there are better materials that they could be made out of? So the Hagstrom that I've just got, the fretboard's made out of composite, and I don't know what it's called, but I assume it's something similar to like the Rich Light they were using on those Gibsons for a while, and it's fine. It's like I honestly don't give a shit. It doesn't make any difference to me. It's just like it's a dark colored material. It looks exactly like dark rosewood or maybe light colored ebony or whatever. It's just like, and it doesn't. The guitar sounds fine, and it's like it doesn't make any difference. So it's like, why aren't we just making guitar? Why aren't we just making fretboards out of this?
Well,
It's crazy.
I think it's the same reason why why smoking was deemed to be cool, and while we still burn fossil fuels, because the parties of interest where the money flows, they are not gonna, they're not gonna give up on the Tonewood argument, especially the likes of PRS and so on, But
Oh god, yeah.
But at the same time, nobody has ever really made a proper kind of, I'm going to say video, and I don't think it's impossible, but I completely agree that there's no reason to have like some exotic wood for your guitar if you're going to be playing high gain stuff. But when you do go into the realms of jazz and blues and stuff like that, how much, how different is the tone going to be using different composite weird materials? But here's another thing, that this is what always bugged me about the Tonewood argument, was not the fact that the wood made such a difference in tone, but was like, is that the only tone that's pleasing to the ear, the one that is possibly given by the wood? I mean, there might be other materials which might give pleasing tones as well, if that is the argument. Why does it have to be wood? It could be, I don't know, something else.
I completely agree. That makes perfect sense, and especially the way, like, technology and materials is advancing now. With like things like 3D printing and whatnot. It's like, why isn't that being explored in more depth? Few and far between are the guitar companies still trying to make guitars out of anything but wood. That's a really strange thing to me. It's like, now you mention it, and in terms of the jazz guitar argument, it's like, well, yeah, if you're listening to those kind of very very detailed, clean sounds and so on, but at the same time, to the audience, it's like, because we know, don't we, that 99% of the audience don't actually really give that much of a shit. So much of it is just about the performer, and the guy actually playing the guitar and how he experiences that. But to my mind, it seems like, I mean, coming from my own perspective, I'm I wouldn't say I'm a purist, but I do like the idea of, I mean, we discussed this with the whole vintage guitar stuff. I do like the idea of sort of old guitars made out of wood, but at the same time, the you know, the raw logic of it says that we really ought to be exploring in the idea of making guitars out of recycled stuff. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
But even if you like,
Every other industry is trying to change to it a little bit, aren't they? Or
yeah,
at least pretending to be to some degree. Some of them.
but even if you love wooden guitars, it doesn't mean that all your guitars have to be made of wood. Like
Yeah,
the vintage thing is a completely understandable argument. Say, oh, I really like vintage stuff, so therefore it's going to be a wooden Gibson. But
yeah.
you know, you're probably going to have 3 or 4 guitars. Do they all have to be?
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I guess that's really the argument for the, you know, the robot tuners. A Gibson has to be a Gibson, but something else can be anything else.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
and it's like with Ibanez, they did try that ergodyne thing and it didn't take off or whatever. Maybe the ergodyne thing wasn't as good as it wanted to be, but you know,
But maybe they missed the trick. If they made it out of this new composite that they have, they should have made it £1,000, not 150. Then people would say, "Oh, this is this new space age shit. This has to be good," because that's how people
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny
But it
how
does.
it's funny how Ibanez couldn't do anything with it, but a small little company in Holland could. I know it'd be a different composite, but it's funny how they seem to. I think Aristides put all their eggs in that basket. All their guitars are made. I don't think they make wooden ones at all, do they?
I think they've really understood their market. I think
Yeah,
Ibanez marketed it to like their general public. This is, you know,
yeah,
this is
probably.
the guitar for like young new metalers or whatever, and there you go, and here it is, and everyone went, "Oh no, you're all right." I
Yeah,
don't think they didn't properly commit to it. You know, I
yeah.
think you kind of sometimes you have to put all your eggs in a basket for people to actually take you
Yeah, that's
seriously
something
with
I
it.
think. I think Aristides done that. Plus, with the bigger companies like Ibanez, if they bring out a range and it doesn't sell X amount that year, they just discontinue it and move on to something else.
Yeah,
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 but
yeah,
but
yeah.
but
You're right.
but Ibanez is very much a Japanese company, and you could imagine that something like that being trialed in Japan would go much better than it being trialed here, for example.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And they
their
have
market's
enough
funny.
people there to buy it. You know, they've got a massive population, so that might be one reason.
Yeah, their market is quite weird. Have you ever seen like ESP's range of guitars in Japan?
Yes, crazy
Not
stuff.
even close. It's not even close to like the rest of the world. It's nuts.
Yeah.
Guitars
That
are made.
because they'll just endorse people and make the craziest things they can come up with, and I think that's
Uh,
so refreshing to look at.
Yeah,
yeah,
they're very traditional in their what you know, happy to accept any weirdness, whereas we're traditional and not accepting any weirdness.
Yeah. I think also they want to be they have this aspect where that's where they express their uniqueness, whereas I think we're desperate to be like, you know, the guys at the top of their game are still too afraid to be different. You look at John Mayer, he was given the opportunity to design his own PRS, and what did he make? A fucking Strat.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
it's like, well done, John. You know,
yeah. That's.
yeah, we don't like rocking the boat.
no.
I mean, you know, it was crazy when he actually felt the need to put out videos out on his own social media stories explaining it. They came
Yeah,
out.
I've played a couple of those, you know, those Silver Skies, and I mean, they're okay, but just like, I mean,
It's the Silver Sky is a good example of what happens when a bunch of egos collide
yeah.
and they form a super ego.
My one regret with that is that when the you know, the Nebula came out, they only made 500 of those, and I had the opportunity to buy one for what was about £1,800 at the time, and I didn't, and I had the money, and I just decided not to because I was like, I'm not sure. And it's like if I sold that now,
Yeah.
I'd like triple my money or something like that. Oh well, never mind.
Wow, that's it for our list anyway.
Yeah.
I even made notes. I'm gonna scan them in now and keep them.
Yeah, that's it. Scan them in, upload them. Gold star.
Oh man, no, I'm currently I'm scratching my head. I have we've got 6 songs. The drums are done. We're gonna do the guitars next, and then the bass. And I have already re-recorded all 6 songs with guitar 6 or 7 times.
Why?
Because there's this element that I'm not getting into the recording, and it's fucking destroying my soul. And it's always, it's always that little bit off, just that slight bit out that I'm not happy with. And because I've got time, I go back and do it again. Try another option. It's crazy.
Like when we record,
Gary,
I'm not mixing. I'm not
Gary, you
mixing
don't
ours.
have to slag off Strandberg. It slags itself off. Gary, the guy, friend of mine, he jams with us as well. He's got one of those Strandberg's headless guitars.
Yes.
It's a
I was
fucking
interested-
abomination. It
Really?
is.
That bad?
The guitar is great. It looks like a fucking abortion. I don't know who came up with that shit. I'm sorry. It's like,
Well,
Gibson
he-
invented it. The headless guitar.
it's awful.
That's it.
But it's not just the fact that it's
Fucking
headless.
headstock joint.
It's the whole shape. It's the whole kind of like. Sorry, Gary.
Isn't like isn't the neck profile graduated on the back, so you
Yes.
have a place to put
It
the
looks
thumb or
like
whatever?
they
It's
fucking
like
put a
Yeah.
baseball bat in the front of it, and then shaved it halfway through.
yeah.
It's crazy. It's just awful.
It's meant to be quite clever if you're a shredder. It runs where your thumb. It goes with where your thumb would twist it.
Yeah, I quite like so Pliny, isn't it? He plays Strandberg.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and I quite like his latest record. I quite like that, but it's a bit samey, and it's a bit sort of nice prog, isn't it? It's like something to have on in the background, but
Per Nilsson plays them as well.
yeah, and obviously Rabio Mustard got one lately because he gets one of everything.
Yeah. He's a great player though.
He is. He's,
Isn't he?
yeah. Yeah, everyone agrees on that. He's just, he's so bloody talented. But no, I mean, to come back to that, I think so. So what I would say to you, Helmut, is that perfect is the enemy of good. And that sometimes you just have to what is it? Great. It was art is never finished. It's only ever abandoned.
Yeah. No, actually, overall, I'm happy with it. There's just certain things that I'm not getting in there, which I really want in there. It's like these little, when you hang on a chord just that little bit too long, and it starts feeding back. So not like this, but just that absolute resonance that goes through. So. And there's only really one way to do it. That is to be in a room.
Get in the room with the amplifier.
There's only one way to do it. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that might have to still be done. So that's pretty much it for me. What about you guys?
Yeah, I think we've covered everything, haven't we? It's getting late as well.
Yeah, always does.
I have a crazy early start tomorrow.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Oh shit, man! You should have said something.
I forgot until I remembered.
Yeah. Well, in a day or two, do another little promotion. Just get the video under people's noses again. I noticed that the other one actually didn't get that bad views, and so other than that, I don't know. I always enjoy this.
Yeah, me too.
That's good.
What's next week? Can't remember the topic. I'm gonna have to check here. I think
Let's have a look.
actually think we should take Peter's next week, because we've done like gear twice in a row.
Right.
What was it? Writing.
Songwriting, yeah. Different
Songwriting.
approaches and different methods, and
Yeah, I'm interested in that, definitely.
yeah, it's always good hearing other people's methods and stuff and
I think
perspectives
that's
on
a
how to
good
go
topic.
about things.
That'll
Yeah,
be another 3
100%.
hours.
Yeah. Before we get
Yeah, well,
started.
fuck it, man. 6 hours.
Yeah.
We probably already touched on it a tiny bit tonight with the use of VSTs for demoing and stuff.
Oh yeah, it's a rabbit hole though for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
we'll
assuming.
we'll need to write some talking points and stick very closely to them, or we'll be here until 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming, Peter. I thought that your main kind of um, point there was to actually you actually meant the actual songwriting. How do you come up with stuff? How do you plunk shit together and build it up and
Yeah.
flesh it
Yeah.
out? But obviously the gear can be included. I mean,
Yeah, how the
process.
technology has helped that like over the years. I mean, it's easier to do it now than it was 10
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a rich vein.
Well, okay. Well, I'm gonna say good night for the stream. So I'm gonna stop the stream now. And I think we might have missed. I think I got my system wrong. I think we might have missed a little bit at the beginning. So I don't know if that still went in or not. But we might have missed a minute or two in the beginning of this. But anyway, so I'm gonna just say thanks whoever managed to sit with us until this time. Next Wednesday again, 9 o'clock. Topic will be songwriting and everything that goes in and around it.